Chapter 26. Royal Palace. The corpses in front of him no longer caused any shock, at least to Chongnyo. Perhaps he has begun to gradually adapt to such an environment. After all, after coming to this world, he has to face these things frequently. For him, he cannot have a heart of kindness at all. So he still stepped over the corpses and slowly began to walk towards the palace hall, while Luosta followed with a few people. If it weren't for the presence of so many corpses, the scenery of this palace could be said to be perfect, but even if there were so many lying on the ground, it would hardly affect the beauty in this aspect. However, after entering the palace, everyone was astonished by the luxury inside. The same circular dome, but at least 50 meters high. In the wide hall, even the sound of breathing began to echo. The throne at the top of the hall, it doesn't take much thinking to know that this must be the exclusive place for King Roya. The golden seat is obviously made of pure gold. A huge red gem is inlaid on the top of the seat. It is almost 2 meters wide. It is no problem to seat 2 or 3 people. The walls on both sides of the palace, including the pillars, are all decorated with gold. Just the decoration of the palace hall would be impossible to complete without billions of belly. As a country with a very large land area, the kingdom of Roha has always been in dire straits of living conditions for its citizens. It is really unimaginable. What is the level of extravagance of this king? There are no corpses in this hall. They must have run out, so it looks particularly elegant and luxurious. The top dome of the palace is entirely made of glass. The light shines down along the glass, making the palace look magnificent as a whole. Your Majesty, this place is so shocking. Luosta looked like he had never seen the world before and said with emotion. I don't know how many people's flesh and blood these things are made from. It's really surprising. But now I'm more curious about one thing, that is, how much money is there in this king's treasury? Chongnyo smiled. Said. Your Majesty will make the statistics as soon as possible and submit them to Your Majesty at that time. Lusta said. What do you think about moving the palace to this place in the future? Chongnyo asked. It's not impossible. It's just that the two places are far apart. I think the location of our true palace is better. The Nannuwa port has been established and perfected. After that, all the commerce began to be concentrated in that place. However, it is different here. It's not that convenient in comparison, Lusta said. You're right, it's a pity that such a wonderful building is missing. Chongnyo said with a slight sigh. The business content I planned before will be implemented in this area as soon as possible in the future. After staying here for 2 days, we will hurry back. Let's sort out the plans we need to make in the future from beginning to end. I don't require that cities like Jiluo and Gukengli become like ours now within 2 years, but at least within 2 years, all the people's survival problems must be solved. The question, as to what should be done next, is something you must consider. You must give me a plan before you go back. You are not only the country's money bag, but more importantly, you are the god who maintains the lives of the people. Chongnyo said calmly to Luosta with no expression on his face. However, after the other party heard this, he looked cautious, but inside he was filled with excitement and other emotions. This is a big project, and even Luosta has to treat it with caution. Fortunately, he and his people have already been considering these things before, and now they are just making some slight changes based on the actual situation of the country. When Luosta was recognized by Chongnyo for the first time, he was just the person responsible for communicating with the outside world in the palace. Chongnyo liked this guy's cleverness and brains, and directly made him go from the lowest level to a top cadres of the country. But the facts have proved that Chongnyo's overall decision-making was not wrong, and Luosta has indeed demonstrated his value in the true kingdom. From the beginning of the country's poverty to the present, earth-shaking changes have been achieved in more than 2 years. Although all the planning was issued by Chongnyo, Luosta was the implementer from beginning to end, and there are many aspects all have exceeded Chongnyo's early forecasts. Now that Luosta heard that His Majesty the King had achieved such a mission, he no longer felt the anxiety and excitement he felt at first, but felt more of a sense of responsibility and responsibility. Luosta rarely pushed up the frames of his glasses. He crossed his hands on his waist and bowed respectfully. He said in a calm and soft voice, Your Majesty, don't worry. I will definitely make a comparison for you in the past 2 days. Satisfactory planning. You have worked hard on this matter, and the country will not forget what you have done. All the hard work will be paid back to you in the future. Your Majesty is serious, Luosta said quickly. Chang Nyo looked at the hunched-over Luosta and patted his shoulder with relief. Luosta was nearly 10 years older than Chang Nyo, but his thinking could make everyone surrender. Let's go and take a look at what the king of Roya Kingdom looks like, and let others look for him. I don't know where he died at this time. Chang Nyo said with a smile. King Roya? Your Majesty, the big fat man lying on the ground in front of the hall just now should be King Roya. When Luosta heard what Chang Nyo said, he immediately thought about it. After all, when I came in just now, I noticed that the big fat man lying there who was completely dead, and the crown on his head, was obviously not someone else. Moreover, there were no people in the palace hall, and it was obvious that almost all of them died. Outside, as for their king, a guy with little strength, it is naturally impossible to run faster than others. Really? Then we'd better take a look quickly. Chang Nyo was really as curious as a child at this moment. When he came in, he really didn't pay much attention to the people lying on the ground. Anyway, they were in the main hall now. Walking out the door is just a matter of a few steps. But when I walked out, I saw a fat man who looked to be at least 500 or 600 pounds lying on the ground. The clothes he was wearing were made of cloth made in his own country. He was decorated with such luxurious decorations, especially the crown on his head, which was inlaid with more than a dozen huge gems. Chapter 27 The Newspaper That Shocked the World. As for the big fat man's face, no one wanted to see it. He was dead now anyway, and Chang Nyo didn't even think about taking one last look at him. I have never seen what he looks like before, and I don't want to know about it now. It's just that I know that the other party is indeed dead, which is more important. After Chang Nyo knelt down and looked at it for a while, he confirmed his true identity and rolled his eyes in contempt. I really don't know how this guy has survived all these years. As a king, it would be quite shameful for him to die if he has brought his country into such a horrible state. Luosta, this guy still has some valuable things on him. He won't need them since he's dead anyway. Remember to put them into the treasury. Chang Nyo turned his head and said to Luosta who was standing behind him. Don't worry, Your Majesty, I will definitely do a good job. Luosta said with a smile. When Chang Nyo said such words, several people behind him, including the guards, were a little surprised. No matter how quiet he was still the leader of a country. Although he failed now, his identity has not been lost. A person has just died and his body has not yet cooled down. If you start to treat him like this now, it is really satisfying. Outside the palace. Junhee, captain of the guard, there are too many people who are unwilling to go back and want to see our king. How should we deal with this kind of thing? On the streets outside the palace, people who were originally planning to evacuate to the royal city, because after the big dog died and there was no threat, all began to ask to return to where they lived, but now the streets are still overcrowded, and there is no one. He had a hostile mentality, but instead he had a huge smile on his face. Each of them is looking forward to seeing the face of His Majesty the King of True Kingdom, at least to let them remember what the king who came to save them looks like. When Junhee heard his subordinates report this matter, the expression on his face was generally helpless. Before this, except for encountering this kind of situation in the royal city of my own country, I had never thought about or heard of it in other places. Especially when their country has just been occupied, it is indeed surprising that ordinary people still have such great enthusiasm. Junhee was also very helpless. He had already seen this scene, but he could not directly let the guards disperse the enthusiasm of the people. After thinking for a while, Junhee could only say to the guards below, "Let's do this for now. But we must pay attention to maintaining order and not let any problems occur to these people. There is also a high possibility that there will be people in the crowd who are unfavorable to His Majesty the King. People, you must also pay attention to these things." Yes. Junhee turned to look in the direction of the palace. He also wanted to take a look there, but as the captain of the king's guard, he still needed to understand the priorities of the matter clearly. Especially for Junhee, on the surface he is just the captain of the king's guard, but in fact he is almost equivalent to the general of the entire country, responsible for supporting the deployment of the entire country's army. The burden on him is also very heavy. In this country, as far as he feels, the most powerful person in the country besides His Majesty the King should belong to him. "Gaju, come here!" Junhee shouted while looking at a young man standing not far away who was chatting. After hearing the sound, the other party hurried over and shouted respectfully, "Captain of the guard, what are your orders? How are the captured pirates doing now?" His Majesty the King specifically ordered that those with devil fruit abilities must be well controlled. Junhee looked at each other and asked directly. Don't worry, Captain, these people are completely under control and have all put on restraint collars. They are all in cages now, and there will be no accidents to any of them. Jiiju replied seriously. How many people have been confirmed to have devil fruit abilities? What are their abilities? Shunye asked again. Captain, these things have been confirmed. A total of 11 devil fruit ability users have been captured in the entire Roha Kingdom. According to interrogation statistics, these people are all from the West Sea. The devil fruit abilities have also been recorded in detail and can be submitted at any time. Over to you and your Majesty. Jiiju stood at attention and replied. You must not be careless. The more this time comes, the more careful you must be before telling them to be more alert. Junhee said. Each of those pirates has already put on a neck collar, and this thing is made of fine steel. It can even be said that it cannot be made with the current technology. It also incorporates the characteristics of Sea Tower Stone, which can completely suppress demons. The ability of those with fruit abilities. In addition to its own hardness, the inside is equivalent to a bomb that can explode at any time. Changniu also spent a lot of money to buy it from the system space. The main reason for purchasing these gadgets is to deal with devil fruit users. Now they are considered lambs to be slaughtered, but no one knows whether some special situations may happen next. On the surface, everything is going very smoothly, but in reality, no one dares to guess what is going on. The kingdom of Roha is different from the previous kingdom of Toru. There are already many nobles in this country, and almost all of them are the king's confidants. They usually squeeze and treat the people harshly when doing things. But when the war broke out, all those so-called nobles disappeared overnight. No one can guarantee whether they will have any backup in the end, but in a place like the South Blue Sea, Junhee fully believes in the strength of His Majesty the King, and it is enough to dominate this area. But even so, he is still meticulous in doing things and does everything to perfection. This is the kind of result he wants. It's time for the next day. The lively thing these days is not the true kingdom, but the Navy headquarters base. Because the Toru kingdom attacked the Roya kingdom, the newspaper finally turned to save the citizens of the Roya kingdom. The key was the blue pheasant attached to the photo. Even the world government was completely helpless when it saw this kind of thing. The moment the newspaper appeared, the news almost spread throughout the pirate world. The newspaper office spared no effort to copy these things. At this moment, whether it was the pirates, the navy, the world government, or other countries, they all knew that there was a country like the Toru kingdom in the South Blue Sea. Moreover, it was clearly marked in the newspaper that we are forever friends with the navy. Chapter 28 The Navy fell into the pit. The newspaper this time can be regarded as causing 1,000 waves with one stone. The newspaper not only contained information about the friendship between the Toru kingdom and the navy, but also included photos of King Toru and Aoki Pheasant chatting. The most important thing is that there is no way that Changniu will miss this opportunity to promote its own country. The various advertisements above are also flashy. Anyway, in this era, few people are aware of this marketing method. But those people at the Navy headquarters base are all dumbfounded now. Aokiji hasn't returned to the Navy headquarters base yet, but now the phone bug in his arms has rang countless times. In the naval headquarters base. Wow haha. There was a laugh that couldn't stop. Garp looked at Warring States. The moment he saw the newspaper, he couldn't help but laugh. Garp, you bastard, can you stop laughing? Don't you want to go back to your hometown in Donghai? Get out of here and don't let me see you again. Sengoku yelled angrily. However, Garp continued to smile and eat as if nothing had happened. The newspaper in his hand was still there. The most conspicuous place was the photos of Changniu and Aokiji. I didn't expect that a group of us old guys would be tricked by a little king this time. The key to rescuing the country controlled by pirates is that our Navy's Associate General also participated. The little guy made a good calculation, and now it is estimated that even the world government is having a headache, and even so, they can't say a word. Garp said with a smile, but he also admired the other party's scheming. Taking over a country and not being criticized by everyone outside was the most brilliant method. The key is that as soon as this newspaper comes out, the Navy headquarters base is equivalent to having an agreement with the Kingdom of Toru. The Navy Commodore is involved in the war. No matter how you look at the Navy headquarters base, you will not be able to escape this time. Garp, what do you think we should do now? Before I left, I specifically told Aokiji that no matter what happens, he must not participate in the battle between the two countries. But look at the current situation. It was announced so obviously. Warring states said still somewhat angrily. What's the use of pursuing these things now? Instead of that, why not see what the little king wants to do? I think this matter is definitely not an accident. The whole thing is like a big chess game for us to jump into. Carp said. However, for Changnyo, when he first went to Rogtown and did not restrict the abilities of his subordinates, his purpose was to send someone from the navy to prove the trust between his country and the navy headquarters. There is a friendly relationship between them, but although things have changed qualitatively now, the final outcome is what they want to see. Even this time the war between the two countries has pushed this matter to a peak. So now the entire naval base is in a complete headache, and the last thing they want to see is this kind of thing. The Navy headquarters itself pursues absolute justice and does not favor any country or force. But now that this incident has occurred, the balance of this so-called absolute justice has tilted. In any case, this matter has a relatively large impact on the Navy, but they have nothing to do. After all, the era of great pirates has arrived. All major forces on the sea have gradually merged, and the era of pirates has also begun. It has developed to its peak. The Navy is already exhausted just to deal with these pirates, let alone deal with the true kingdom where the sky is high and the emperor is far away. The South Blue Sea itself is the weakest among the 4 sea areas. Even if something like this happens, the Navy headquarters base can only suppress the matter. But in the office of Marshal Sengoku at the Navy headquarters, Garp and Sengoku looked at each other, probably feeling unspeakable pain in their hearts. Garp doesn't care, but the Warring States period is really full of troubles now. As a wise general, he really doesn't have any good ideas at the moment. I will go back tomorrow. This matter will not have much impact on the Navy. I believe King Tru will not make any excessive moves. He will wait until the pirate situation is stabilized. Just go deal with it, Carp said. It can only be the Warring States also said. But what they didn't know was that in the following days, the True Kingdom's business development path had reached a rapid speed. All merchant ships hang the flag of the Kingdom of True and the flag of the Navy and sail on the sea. Even if they encounter pirates, they don't have to stay away. Even if they pass by them, few pirates dare to attack them. This thing is the purpose of Changnyo. Business is the economic lifeline of this country. This is the cheapest and simplest way to maximize benefits. Because after this incident, let alone whether other neighboring countries had any thoughts about the True Kingdom, in terms of strength, they did not dare to make any move. Since the Kingdom of Roha was occupied, the entire Kingdom of True has become the largest country in the South Blue Sea. The population of the entire country also belongs to the largest among all countries in the South Blue Sea. The True Palace was still the same one as before. Changnyo did not choose to use the more luxurious Loya Palace. Instead, he chose to demolish the whole place and put all the valuable things into the palace treasury. If they really use the palace of the original Kingdom of Roha, let alone the possibility of being criticized by people with ulterior motives, the things in front of them will not be of any benefit to them. The Royal Palace of True is close to the coast, and the Royal City has become the core area of economic development of the entire Kingdom of True. These things cannot be abandoned. Changnyo doesn't have the same idea as King Roha. It's really useless to live in such a luxurious place. Instead of doing this, it's better to improve the country's economy. But most kings have not considered this kind of thing, or have no such concept at all. These people hardly cherish the throne that has been passed down, otherwise their country would not have become so impoverished. 1 month after this incident ended, the first major meeting was held in the Royal Palace of True. There were a lot of people participating in this big meeting, almost 100 or so people. The Kingdom of True also began to plan to carry out special reforms of its own country. Chapter 29 Public Meeting of the Kingdom. Early in the morning. The entire periphery of the palace is now filled with people, almost all of whom are ordinary people. Of course, there are also guards maintaining order. After the Kingdom of Roha became the Kingdom of True, all the people are now looking forward to this meeting. After all, this time will be the moment that changes their destiny. Not only the Roha people, but also the original Toru people attach great importance to it. There are even many people who have traveled thousands of miles to come here just to learn about the content of this meeting as soon as possible. Such a prosperous situation is impossible to see in any country in the pirate world. The surrounding people are always crowded, and more people are coming here. Changnyo, who was staying in the palace, naturally knew what was going on outside, but now overall, he was a little helpless. But before this meeting started, he had already arranged a national live broadcast, but not many people were standing in front of the live broadcast. Junhee was the person in charge of the security of this conference. He stood on the wall of the palace and shouted directly to the people below, "Everyone, I am Junhee, the person in charge of the king's guard. His Majesty ordered that all personnel are not allowed to enter the palace. It's so crowded that His Majesty has placed live broadcast stations in every area, where you can intuitively see the live broadcast of this palace meeting." Because most people didn't know anything about the live broadcast station before, so they crowded in front of the palace. After hearing this, Jun and the king's guards under his command also began to explain. The whole process lasted for more than half an hour, and the crowd began to slowly disperse. As for those who still refused to leave, they had no choice but to reset a live broadcast station in front of the palace. Different from the live broadcast using phone bugs, these things are purchased by Changnyo from the system space, which can at least maintain sufficient stability. After all, they can't get a phone bug that can live broadcast at all now. The key is that this thing needs to be cultivated from an early age, otherwise it will be completely unusable. Such a large area in the palace hall is now filled with tables and chairs. This meeting may be a bit long, and they are not allowed to stand and chat. Many unfamiliar faces appeared in this meeting. Changnyo presided over it himself, and Luosta was responsible for the content of the meeting. They had been discussing things for several days, so naturally they needed to be carried out slowly. Everyone who is sitting here is concentrating and maintaining a high spirit. They didn't chat with each other or even make eye contact. They were all looking forward to Changnyo's arrival and the official start of their new national journey. The meeting is scheduled to start at 8 am, and everyone inside and outside the palace is now protected by the king's guards. And because the true kingdom has always been on the headlines of newspapers recently, even those newspapers in the New World have people coming to search for hot news. Changnyo's residence. Your Majesty, the meeting is about to begin. Are you ready? Outside the room door, the servants and maids shouted softly. Not long after she finished speaking, Changnyo opened the door. He looked very different today. Standard king's clothing, a white uniform, a light yellow shirt lined with a white bow tie, and it looks completely custom-fitted, making Changnyo look quite elegant at this moment. Wearing a golden crown on her head, there is no so-called gem inlay, but it looks elegant and elegant. Has everyone arrived yet? As soon as Changnyo opened the door, he directly asked the maid who was bowing her body to salute. Your Majesty, everyone has arrived and is currently waiting for Your Majesty to go. The maid said. Not only did they arrive, those people had already started to go before dawn at 6 o'clock in the morning, sitting there waiting for the meeting to come. After listening to what the servant said, Changnyo nodded slightly, and then took out another pile of paper from the room, which was almost as thick as a book. Take it with you and let's go there too. Changnyo directly handed the information in his hand to the maid, and then said calmly. Even Changnyo attached great importance to this meeting. After all, it involved the country's future planning, and such an opportunity did not come every time. Now that the initial stabilization of the country has been completed, then comprehensive economic development will begin. As long as money comes in, the rest will not matter at all. Outside, whether it is the live broadcast venue in the royal city or the original kingdom of Roha, the live broadcast stations in every city are already crowded with people, and they are all protected by the army to prevent overcrowding and damage. All the people also put down what they were doing and ran to the live broadcast station to watch. They all wanted to know what benefits would come to them next. The key is that although every place is a bit crowded, it is surprisingly quiet, and no one will argue about whether they are in the front or behind. And before 6 o'clock in the morning, the live broadcast content had already started. The palace hall was empty at first, and finally full of people, waiting until the meeting is about to start. The people were feeling anxious. After all, they didn't know what benefit this would have to them. However, in the nearly month of publicity, everyone has already understood that the content of the meeting is mainly aimed at the future direction of the country. It's His Majesty the King. His Majesty the King has appeared. In the eyes of everyone, Changnyo walked into the palace hall dressed in king's clothes and elegant. In an instant, all the people shouted for him. This was also the first time for many people to see the king of their country. Although he is very young, no one looks down on him. In the palace hall, as soon as Changnyo appeared, everyone stood up immediately and everyone saluted respectfully. When he arrived at his seat, Chang Nyo smiled and said, "Everyone, get up. Today's content is a bit long, and it is a meeting in front of all the people of our country. I hope everyone can stop talking nonsense today and all decision-making meetings will be completed and implemented at the agreed time." "Yes, Your Majesty, I will definitely abide by the principles of this meeting," Luosta said respectfully. Chang Nyo walked to his seat and sat down directly. At the front of the entire hall, there was a camera. This thing was much easier to use than a phone bug. Not only are high-definition images presented, but the sound is also synchronized, and there is no need to worry about being interfered by anything. After Chang Nyo sat down, the others began to sit down one after another. Everyone was upright and had meticulous expressions on their faces. Chapter 30 The King's Public Speech. This is a live broadcast meeting for the whole country. If you are not careful, you may attract criticism. It was also the first time for Chang Nyo to do such a thing, but overall he looked very calm and indifferent. "Your Majesty, this is the content to be discussed at this meeting in accordance with your request." Gagoya played the role of a secretary this time and looked very stylish. Wearing standard professional attire, with a bun, a white shirt on the upper body, a hip skirt with black stockings, and 5-centimeter high heels, he looks very elegant and professional. "Just put things down first. Sit aside and be ready to record things at any time." Chang Nyo replied in a low voice with a smile. "Yes, Your Majesty." After Gagoya retreated and sat there, Chang Nyo sat upright and straightened his current clothes, looking more mature. Then there was no need for him to say anything more. The people below started pushing the camera in front of him and stopped about 5 meters away. Now all the live broadcast screens outside are showing the appearance of His Majesty the King. At this moment, no one spoke, it was quiet, and even the sound of breathing and heartbeat could be heard. Chang Nyo coughed twice, and then with a smile, he waved and said, "Hello, hello, people of the Kingdom of True. There may be many people who don't know me. So let me introduce myself first. I am Genji Nagano, the king of our Toru kingdom, an ordinary person living in the same place as everyone. I am honored to be the king of this country, and I am even more fortunate to have you as my people. This is my honor and my responsibility. More than 2 years ago, when I became the king of this country, I thought with all my heart that in the future I must let my people live the prosperous life they want, at least to ensure that you can, in your future life, no more worries about food, no more worries about warmth and coldness, no more worries about safety. As the King of True, today, we are opening the first national live broadcast meeting of our true country. The purpose is to let you know that we can bring you the life you want in the future, and how should we do it? Whether you are an original Toru citizen or a Roha citizen who has just joined this big family, from now on you all belong to the same identity, that is, you are a member of the big family of our Toru country. It is you who have given us rights, status and honor. To this end, all of us will spare no effort to create the living conditions that our Kingdom of True deserves. For this reason, I am willing to solemnly swear here that the people will be the most important thing that our country of True puts first. As the King of True, I am also willing to advance and retreat together with you. Of course, we are also very grateful for your expectations for us. If there are shortcomings in the future, we also hope that the people in front of the live broadcast station can give timely corrections and replies." After Chang Nyo finished speaking, he sat where he was and nodded directly to show his courtesy. However, other people sitting in the main hall were already shocked and dumbfounded. How could a king of a country say such a thing? The key is to face the people of the country. It's just that they don't know at all what's happening outside now. After the words of His Majesty the King and their eyes fell, almost the whole country was silent for a moment, and then there were sudden shouts in front of every live broadcast station. They all shouted directly about their Majesty the King, and most of them were even moved to tears. It's no wonder that they behaved like this, especially the previous Roha nationals. They have been treated in such inhumane ways for who knows how many years. Now that they have come out of such a devilish life, they suddenly feel as if they have entered heaven. His Majesty the King is actually so amiable and willing to put them first. This is what makes everyone feel moved. The king personally took the initiative to communicate with them and introduced himself. Indeed, many people had never seen their king before, but after this time, the image of Chang Nyo had been deeply imprinted in their minds. Such words of encouragement, not to mention these ordinary people, even the soldiers who were responsible for guarding the live broadcast station, were all moved and confused. The first public appearance has already caused such a sensation. Even the reporters from other countries and the Grand Line had a look of shock on their faces. They must have met many more people than these common people. At least one thing that is certain is that among so many countries, Chang Nyo is definitely the only king who can say such a thing. The reporters kept taking pictures and flipping the phone bugs in their hands. In addition, others also started to communicate with people at the headquarters through the phone bugs. However, after Chang Nyo finished speaking, the photographer began to quickly retreat back with the camera, and the screen locked onto the entire palace hall again. This time, after the king spoke first, it was fully confirmed that the meeting had officially started. The solemn scene also made everyone watching start to become quiet, for fear that they would miss something if they didn't listen carefully. After sorting out all the emotions, the meeting finally began to officially begin in the main hall. This is the first national meeting of the Kingdom of Tru. Let me first talk about the introduction and rules of the meeting. First of all, the person who led this meeting was our great King of Tru. A total of 176 people participated in the meeting, and the content of all the meetings was broadcast live to the entire Kingdom of Tru. The following meetings will focus on comprehensive discussions, and everyone must remain quiet until the topic of discussion comes up. Luosta stood up, looked at everyone and said loudly, he was the host of this meeting, so he was naturally qualified to say such a thing. No one sitting there spoke. It goes without saying that these rules were explained to them. However, it was just the first time for them to participate in such a formal meeting, which made some people feel excited and uneasy. In addition, there were too many people watching this meeting outside. In some respects, the number of people watching this time was not only the citizens of the True Kingdom, but was also broadcast to other countries by other reporters. The key is that the content of this meeting does not need to be hidden or kept secret. It does not hurt even if people from other countries know about it. It seems that everyone has no objections. If this is the case, then I will announce that the first national meeting of the Kingdom of Tru will now officially begin. Seeing that no one spoke, Luosta shouted loudly. Chapter 31 The Direction of the Meeting. After Luosta's words fell and he paused for a while, Chang Nyo sat down and began to say leisurely, the purpose of hosting this meeting today is mainly for the comprehensive development of people's livelihood issues in the future, considering that many people may not have experienced related things. So the content of this meeting will start from the simplest place. First of all, the first question is about the overall arrangements of the former Roha nationals who have just integrated into our big family. The citizens of the former True Kingdom now have enough living standards and conditions to have enough food and clothing, and they also have their own jobs and responsibilities. The country has now developed its own brand and economic resources, so the new members of the family will be our top priority next. Now, let Minister of Commerce Luosta talk about the national economic site planning of the former Kingdom of Roya. Chang Nyo looked directly at Luosta and said, Yes, Your Majesty. Luosta said respectfully, then turned to look at everyone and stood up. Then he took the draft paper that he had prepared before and said loudly, following the order of His Majesty the King, during this period, we have already begun to sort out the information about the former Roha citizens. Overall planning situation. The total population of the original Kingdom of Roha was 27.68 million, of which about 25.25 million were unable to meet the daily needs of food and clothing. They were severely economically poor and backward. The arrangements for this group of personnel in the future are as follows. What Luosta said was almost like a report, not only to Chang Nyo, but also to the entire Toru Kingdom National Association. After all the reporting questions were finished, the citizens outside did not know what to say, and even stood there dumbly. Starting from today, they at least already know that their True Kingdom will have many more processing plants, which will include wine, beverages, tobacco, food, household utensils, and a series of other products to choose from. Jobs and factories. For them, the most important thing is, and for the True Kingdom, this meeting is essentially the biggest propaganda. And it's the kind of publicity that can be done without any money at all. At least it can let the outside world know that there will be bigger moves in the Kingdom of Tru next. The citizens of the entire country are not as excited as they imagined at this moment. Everyone is holding back their restless hearts because they want to continue listening and know which options are better for them and their future life choices. Read the latest stories and novelbin.com. But even though there are so many factories to be built, with so many citizens, it still seems like a drop in the bucket. Fortunately, the current territory of the True Kingdom is large enough to accommodate this series of developments. After Luosta finished speaking what he wanted to say, everyone else was taking notes seriously, as if they were afraid of missing something. The people who came here to participate in the meeting were not only the former citizens of the Kingdom of Tru, but also the citizens of the kingdom of Roha who had just surrendered, as well as the original army leaders. They can be happy with their current life, at least it no longer has the same wandering life as before. This meeting is of vital importance to everyone. There is no distinction between them, and most of the participants are young people. Their thoughts will be more jumpy, and their ability and degree of handling things are much higher than those of older people. Now that the leaders are already there, you need to do things down to earth these days, and there is no need to worry about other things at all. There is a plan above, but all you need to do below is a plan. This operation of the true kingdom has indeed refreshed everyone's understanding of national politics, and this kind of open and transparent current affairs politics has made those people full of expectations for their future lives. But while their meeting was going on, there were people in other places thousands of miles away watching the live broadcast simultaneously. Wei, why are you here? Didn't I agree that my father has something to do today, so you can go out and play by yourself first? In the same palace, there was a little girl who looked to be only 7 or 8 years old. She had long blue hair and looked very kawaii. She ran in quietly and suddenly appeared next to a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s. At this time, several of them were also watching the live broadcast of the meeting in the special kingdom. But the live broadcast they saw was nothing more than a broadcast of the video footage from the live broadcast station in the Kingdom of True. The little girl named Wei smiled and asked curiously, "Father, what are you looking at?" "Father still needs to take a good look at some big things in other countries. You go out and play with them quickly. Don't stay in the room and disturb us." The middle-aged man who spoke also wore a crown on his head and wore black clothes. He looked very extraordinary. This is Alabasta, a desert country, and it is also an unavoidable scene in the plot of One Piece. It belongs to the largest country on the Great Line, and it is not formed in the form of an island. However, the land area of this country is much larger than the current Kingdom of True. The king who speaks is Cobra, a man who currently holds absolute power. "Father, if I don't want to make any noise, then I'll take a look too," the 7 or 8-year-old girl said coquettishly. However, there was not only the king in this room at this moment, but also several princes and ministers. Faced with this situation, Cobra didn't want to miss any link, so he could only smile helplessly, then hugged the little girl and sat on the seat next to him. At this moment, the first meeting of the True Kingdom was in progress, and almost every word spoken made him, the king, deeply moved. After all, such a situation is too rare. A country can announce the political affairs it will run next, which is completely unexpected by the kings of other countries. What I didn't expect is actually far more than that. It's more about people's planning for the national economy. This is the top priority, including how many people should be corresponding to the establishment of each place, and how many years will it take for economic development. These times must be accurate to within a rough range. These things are things that the kings of these countries have never dared to think about. Cobra has always believed that as long as the lives of the people in his country are better, then he, the king, has done a good job. However, he did not expect for a long time that a person in this country with the countries in the South Blue Sea are actually able to handle national affairs in such detail. Chapter 32 Targeting people in this country. The people in the room were staring at every move on the screen, including the details of everyone's words and actions, all listening carefully. However, in the center of the screen, the king of Toru Kingdom, Chang Nyo, has always been sitting. At the age of 16, he gives people a very mature and stable feeling. "What's the population of our country?" Cobra suddenly asked the people sitting behind him. He had never thought of such a thing. The several ministers behind him also looked at each other, and they already knew the answer without thinking too much. "Your Majesty, our country's land area is too large, but most of it is desert. In terms of population, it may not be as large as the Kingdom of True," a minister behind Cobra said bravely. However, when he said this, even he was probably embarrassed. "Study carefully, a country run by a teenager has surpassed our country that has lasted for thousands of years. I have to say that this broadcast of the Trudeau National Conference can also make us feel deeply." Cobra did not blame the minister behind him, after all, he had never thought of such a thing. Looking at the people talking freely on the screen, Cobra already felt ashamed. "Dad, what are you looking at?" Wei, who was sitting next to Cobra, finally asked in a low voice the question in her heart. She couldn't understand everything she saw in front of her. She couldn't even understand what the other party was saying. Wei, look good, this will definitely become the king who will lead an era. Even my father was deeply touched when he saw this. Cobra said calmly and emotionally. Your Majesty, I believe that the national conditions of the Kingdom of True are very different from ours, and many things cannot be covered in one article. As soon as Cobra finished speaking, the minister behind him who had spoken just now opened his mouth to speak again. Do you think I know what you are talking about? The key question is not at all. Cobra said, turned to look at his daughter Wai Wei, and said with emotion, King of the Toru Kingdom, Genji Changno, I have met his father twice. This little guy became the king at the age of 14. This year at the age of 16, he has already cleaned up the mess left by his father in order. Not only that, but the country's economy and military are no longer what they were before. It can be said that under his leadership, the True Kingdom will soon become the most powerful country in the entire South Blue Sea. Dad, are you serious? Wei Wei asked with surprise. Well, it's just a matter of time. Cobra said with a smile. Don't worry, Dad, Wei Wei will definitely be stronger than the other party in the future. Seeing the serious look on Wei Wei's face, Cobra smiled happily, and then continued to look at the content on the screen. Another place. In a dark-looking room, several old men were also looking at the scene in the True Kingdom in front of them. Every expression was not very good, but at this time, an old man with a goatee opened his mouth and said directly, let CP2 go and inform the King of Toru Kingdom to let him join the world government. I really can't believe that such a shrewd king can appear in such a weak place in the South Blue Sea. Should we let CP0 investigate first to see what is going on in this country? As soon as the old man with the goatee finished speaking, another bald man wearing a white robe and holding a long knife also spoke. It seems that the wife and children of Roger the Pirate King were in this country back then, right? Another old man with a mustache said. Yes, I am quite impressed with this matter. The wife of Pirate King Roger is indeed in the Toru Kingdom. The bald old man holding the knife said. It's better to just let the CP tell them to join the world government, and leave the rest alone for the time being. The old man with the goatee said again. Then let's do it. The old man with a mustache said nothing more, and several people acquiesced to this attitude. This national meeting of the Kingdom of True did indeed attract the attention of kings from many countries. Of course, some seriously reflected on their actions, while others felt that the Kingdom of True existed just to attract attention. Everyone has a different opinion, but their vision cannot determine the future direction of the True Kingdom. The meeting continued, and almost only two things were discussed throughout the morning. Changno hardly said anything during the whole process, just to watch everyone's attitude. Most of the people on the field were young people, and everyone was full of motivation. He just dropped the topic, and made all the arrangements. After all, they had already discussed the issues to be discussed in this meeting before. The purpose of holding such a meeting this time was to let the people of the country know how the prosperous era that will come next will proceed. Changno didn't know that there were so many people outside watching his country's meeting, but it all didn't matter. Even the old men in the world government have already considered the issue of joining the world government, but for the current Toru Kingdom, joining the world government is not a problem. After all, the national economic level is now rising. After joining the world government, it is nothing more than a matter of paying the heavenly gold. But for the following Toru Kingdom, the advantages of joining the world government will be much greater than now. After all, when sailing your own goods on the sea in the future, you no longer have to worry about being plundered by pirates. After all, you can directly summon the navy to fight behind your back. This is the biggest benefit of joining the world government. The heavenly gold provided is nothing more than a protection fee. But all this is just a drop in the bucket for the current True Kingdom, and the regulations for heavenly gold are not just gold, silver, and jewelry. Goods can also be used instead, provided that the group of people at the top can satisfy it. Your Majesty, should we take a break at noon before proceeding? In the main hall of True Palace, Luosta Zhan looked at Changno and asked in a low voice. That's it for this morning. Regarding economic and commercial development, we will inform you immediately. The relevant person in charge must seize the time to implement it as soon as possible. The matters discussed in the morning will be here first, and we will continue to discuss other matters in the afternoon. Let's break up the meeting first. If any of you don't understand something, you must communicate with Lhasa Tower as soon as possible. Don't make mistakes again. In our country, leaders will never allow such low-level mistakes. Changno also stood up and spoke directly to everyone in the hall. Chapter 33 The Pirate Who Made a Mistake. They have been meeting all morning, and the people outside have also been watching all morning. For these people, everything they want to discuss involves their own real interests. However, the contents of these meetings that are actually broadcast live are actually irrelevant. What really needs to be strengthened are those things that cannot be broadcast. Before this public meeting, many people had already begun to study a number of issues, most of which included military and political issues, and there were also discussions on issues that may arise in the future. Most of these things are aimed at the real-time politics and military strengthening theories of the entire pirate world. It only took half a month since the Roha Kingdom merged into the True Kingdom. The military and politics of both sides have been integrated. It is unknown how many people in the middle cooperate. But what can be confirmed now is that Junhee has begun to search for some soldiers with good physical fitness and suitable for training among the entire army, and all of them are training according to the National Guard training method. It is estimated that within a few years, the entire True Kingdom will be able to look down upon the entire South Blue Sea. Although they can do this now, they are not so anxious. Recuperating their energy is the most important issue. At present, the entire kingdom of Toru has an army of about 500,000, but the number of soldiers who can actually reach the selection of entering the guard is not particularly large, but even 10,000 people are completely enough. In the one-day meeting, almost all the future patterns have been decided. The people can really feel the prosperity of their country now, and they spare no effort to cooperate with the issues issued by the above. In the following time, the Kingdom of True almost entered the era of production. But there is one more thing that needs to be dealt with in the meantime. Those were the pirates with devil fruit abilities that they encountered when the Toru Kingdom conquered the Royal Kingdom. The third day after the meeting, Chongnyo met Junhee, the captain of the National Guard, alone in the palace hall. This meeting could be classified as absolutely confidential. It's not that the meeting is not confidential, but the content of their conversation is the kind that must not be spread out. Shunye, how are you dealing with the pirates with devil fruit abilities now? Changyo asked calmly, standing next to Shunye. Your Majesty, they are all in the prison in the royal city now. Each of them has been wearing a restraining ring. I can guarantee that there will never be any trouble. Junhee said respectfully. I asked you to investigate their devil fruit abilities before. Have you found out all of them? Changyo asked again. Everything has been researched and put on this piece of paper for your Majesty to take a look at. Shunye respectfully took out a piece of paper from his pocket, which was filled with dense content. It almost covered all the captured pirates with devil fruit abilities, and what their devil fruit attributes were. After watching for a while, Changyo couldn't help but sigh, 17 devil fruit users. Where did Zihai come from so many things? Your Majesty, my subordinates have also interrogated this matter. Several of them were almost purchased through auctions, and the rest were all obtained by luck or robbery. Junhee said. Bring all these people secretly to the secret room in the back mountain tomorrow. The whole process cannot be seen by any other unrelated person. Chongnyo suddenly said with a serious face. Yes, Your Majesty. Although Junhee didn't understand why, he didn't ask and could only follow Changnyo's request. It's just that when Changnyo looked at the devil fruit abilities of the 17 people on this paper, some of them were indeed quite useful, but most of them were almost useless devil fruits. The best one among them is probably the superhuman petrified fruit. His ability can turn everything he touches into stone. This thing will play an almost vital role in the future infrastructure construction of the country. As for the other devil fruit abilities, none of them were worthy of his attention anyway. But in terms of combat effectiveness, the abilities of these devil fruits are not useless, and they will always have their own unique existence. Now for the Toru Kingdom, or for Changnyo, there is not a shortage of devil fruits in the country. In the original Royal Palace, they have found 6 devil fruits, although the quality is not very good. But overall it's pretty awesome. Changnyo's idea is very simple, that is, to convert all these devil fruits into the strength of the country. Each devil fruit has its own unique existence, and it can naturally be used. A dozen devil fruits, even for a country on the Grand Line, possessing so many at once is considered a luxury, let alone in a land all over the world. Chongnyo looked at the list in his hand again. If these things were replaced by Bailey, this country would be rich for a while. But what they lack now is not money, but the ability to plan for the future. Early the next morning, Shunye had already led a team of guards and secretly moved all 17 pirates with devil fruit abilities to the back hill. In this place behind the palace, there was no one at all. No one will come. Although there are no guards, the only way to get to this place is from the palace. Chongnyo slowly came over at noon. Some of these pirates were scared to death and no longer had the original majesty and domineering power. This so-called secret room in the back of the palace is just built in a cave, and the area below is very wide. Even if it can accommodate 10,000 people, it will not be a problem. When Chongnyo arrived, Jun and his group bowed directly and saluted. As for the pirates who had been restrained, they could only become lambs to be slaughtered. They had no ability to resist and could only stay there obediently. This person was tied to a rope, and everyone had a restraining collar hanging around their neck. There was no sign of possible escape. None of these people take the crimes committed by the true kingdom seriously, and now they are just struggling to survive. Chongnyo nodded to Jun and the group of people, and then looked at the pirates who were bound there with a half-smiling expression. Chapter 34 Extracting Devil Fruit. There are no windows in the entire underground chamber, and there is only a long passage leading here. Even if you don't speak, the sound of breathing can echo inside. Chongnyo took a look at this group of people. These guys had killed their own soldiers at that time. At least nearly 200 people were lost in their hands. Junhee, let the others go out first. Let's stay and have a good chat with these guys. Chongnyo said to Junhee with a smile. In fact, before Junhee could say anything else, the guards had already started to leave. Then the two of them and that group of people were the only ones left in the entire underground secret room. The silence in the air was terrifying. Junhee had no idea what His Majesty's plan was. Why are these people brought to this place? It seems that you are the little king of the true kingdom, right? I warn you to let me go quickly. My uncle is a big pirate on the Great Channel now. If I know that you imprisoned me in this place, then your entire country will be facing disaster. Before Chongnyo could say anything, a relatively large pirate with a huge scar on his face shouted to the two of them in a fierce tone. I asked you to prepare fruits in advance, have you brought them all? Chongnyo ignored the other party and looked directly at Junhee and asked. Your Majesty, these people have killed many of our soldiers, and two of them even slaughtered our people. Do we still need to give them fruit? Junhee said reluctantly. You'll know in a moment. Chongnyo said with a half-smile. With such an expression, Junhee was even more confused, unable to guess at all what His Majesty the King was thinking. Haha, hurry up and bring the fruits to the uncle. I miss these things after not eating them for a long time. I didn't expect that you little guy is quite good. Just let the uncle go and give him 100 million belly. Before I will no longer pursue the matter, uncle. At this time, another pirate with a big beard was talking to himself and laughing. They didn't seem to have any idea what they would face next. However, the other pirates all had the same expression, full of disdain, accompanied by an expression of indifference. Boy, let me go quickly. I will remember your favor from now on. If your kingdom of True encounters any danger, I will be willing to come and help you as long as you give me money. That Scarface just now, the man said again. Shut up. If any of you opens your mouth to speak again, he will be the first to die. Chongnyo said angrily, the key is that in this underground secret room, their roaring voice is really noisy, and the sound keeps echoing here, which is really annoying. Junhee, bring all the things here. No matter how surprised you are by what you see next, you must not let out a word after you walk out of here. Chongnyo said to Junhee with a serious face again. Yes, Your Majesty. Although Junhee was confused and had no idea what was going on, he still nodded seriously. But at this time, a blue light suddenly emitted from Chongnyo's body, and a protective shield like a barrier suddenly appeared in the entire secret room and underground palace. Suddenly, everything outside, including the sound itself, disappeared, and what was left seemed to be an independent space. This is... Junhee was surprised, but he didn't dare to make a sound. Which one has the lithification ability? Chongnyo looked at Junhee and asked directly. This. Without thinking, Junhee pointed directly at the scarred man who had been talking before. At this moment, the pirates also realized that something was wrong. The scarred man stood up and shouted directly, Bitch, what on earth do you want to do? Junhee, kill him. Chongnyo said in a cold voice. Junhee just paused, and then without any hesitation, he was in front of the scarred man in an instant. Now that these pirates have been bound by devil fruit abilities, they have no ability to resist at all, and are even worse than ordinary people. Junhee penetrated the other person's heart with just one finger. The scarred man, who was so arrogant just now, has now turned into a corpse. However, Chongnyo's eyes were not on their pirates, but instead focused on the rows of fruits not far away. All kinds of fruits are placed here just for this moment. After Junhee killed the scarred man, he followed Changnyo's gaze with curiosity and looked at the fruits. But the next scene directly overturned his three views. On top of the originally ordinary fruit, a bunch of bananas instantly changed its original color, becoming earthy yellow with a circular texture, and directly attached to the banana. Changnyo walked slowly to the banana. Is this thing still a banana? It has completely transformed into a devil fruit. At this moment, the other pirates began to feel uneasy after seeing this scene. This thing was the first time in their lives that they encountered someone who could directly extract the existence of devil fruit from others. Junhee opened his mouth in surprise and his eyes almost fell out of his head. He finally understood why Changnyo said just now that no matter what happened, he must not say anything after going out. If this matter were to be revealed, such serious consequences would definitely not be something their true kingdom could bear. King True, we know we are wrong, just give us a chance. No matter what your orders are in the future, we will definitely do whatever you want. The bearded man who looked arrogant just now quickly knelt down and begged for mercy and shouted. The prayer in his voice, mixed with fear, made even his words tremble. Changnyo was not in the mood to deal with these guys, and now he was already immersed in his own plan. Although I had speculated before, I never thought it could actually be done to such an extent. This ability can be called heaven-defying. There are countless devil fruit users in the entire pirate world, and there are many powerful ones. However, the emergence of this situation will definitely subvert the entire pirate world in the future. When a devil fruit user dies, the fruit's ability will be attached to a nearby matching fruit, but this is not absolute. It may be said that 1 or 2 out of 100 will make this choice. Chapter 35 Space Ability Exile. But now that we have the space barrier, it is completely different. The devil fruit ability can only be attached to fruits within the space, otherwise there is absolutely no way to break through this space barrier. Junhee, what do you think of this thing? Changnyo smiled, picked up the devil fruit in his hand and handed it to Junhee. Your Majesty, I feel like I'm in a dream right now. I didn't expect you to be able to extract the devil fruit. And the blue light around here shouldn't be the same. Junhee didn't finish his words, but he left some questions. Changnyo didn't shy away from him at all. After all, the two of them could be considered grown up. Although Junhee was a few years older than him, he had been protected by him almost since he was a child. Changnyo smiled and said, yes, this is the devil fruit ability, but it's just different from what you imagined. Regarding the matters here, including my own abilities, I hope you will not tell anyone about it no matter who you meet in the future. Our country is still too weak and cannot bear the impact of some rumors. Don't worry, Your Majesty, Junhee will definitely keep it secret and won't let a third person know what happened today. Junhee replied with a serious face. Devil fruits are a good thing, but there are too few of them. Changnyo said to himself. Your Majesty, these people. Junhee glanced at the other pirates, then opened his mouth and asked Changnyo. Kill it. There are 2 animal-type ability users here, which are pretty good. You can eat them later if you like, but I suggest you don't because the abilities of these 2 animals are too weak. If there is a chance later, I will find a few good ones for you and distribute them to your subordinates. Although they are not top-notch devil fruits, the overall situation is pretty good. Changnyo said leisurely, not taking the group of pirates seriously at all. Now that others are not dead, they have already begun to discuss the act of dividing people's abilities. Yes, Your Majesty. Junhee could no longer hold back his excitement. Although he had never thought about obtaining devil fruit abilities before, His Majesty the King had already begun to take the lead, so naturally people like him should not be left behind. He didn't have any hesitation about these pirates. Anyway, it was so easy to kill these pirates who were worse than ordinary people. It couldn't be easier. In less than a while, the fruits in the underground secret room began to change one after another. 17 people finally transformed into 17 devil fruits, and none of them escaped. Although these things are not top-notch products, overall they are better than nothing. After sorting all the devil fruits together, Junhee looked at Changnyo, and then directly asked, Your Majesty, how do you deal with these corpses? Changnyo glanced at the 17 corpses on the ground, then directly removed the current space barrier, and stretched out his left hand directly in the direction of those people. At this time, he saw that these people were all covered with a slight blue color. Of light. Exile. Changnyo shouted these 2 words softly, and then all the corpses disappeared immediately. However, at this moment, in a certain corner of the sea, corpses fell directly into the sea one by one. The ability of the space fruit has unlimited possibilities. If the ability of the devil fruit is developed to the extreme, Chang Nyo can already run rampant on this sea. Junhee encountered too many surprising things today. Now that he knew that His Majesty the King had devil fruit powers, the way these dozen corpses disappeared was not so incredible. There are more than a dozen devil fruits placed here, plus the remaining devil fruits in the palace. The entire Toru kingdom now has nearly 30 devil fruits. Although half of them have no effect, the remaining part can be used continuously. It's enough to build a relatively strong team. In fact, this is already considered very few. For some large pirate groups, there are at least 100 people in a pirate group with devil fruit abilities. Even among the Yonko pirates in the future, the number of people with devil fruit abilities will be at least 100. The number has even reached thousands. But now the resources of the true kingdom are limited, and they cannot expose themselves too early. They may encounter some more difficult problems in the future. Among the current devil fruit abilities in the pirate world, Superman-type devil fruits have the most abilities, followed by animal-type devil fruit abilities. As for these natural devil fruits, they are almost all the kind that can be encountered but not sought. After walking out of the underground palace gate, Chang Nyo walked in front and asked Junhee directly behind him, "How far has your domineering practice reached?" "Your Majesty, the armament-colored haki can now be attached to weapons, but the seeing and hearing haki is not yet in place. Sometimes you can only slightly perceive something, but for more specific things, it may still take 2 years. Only then can we do it," Junhee said with his head lowered. "You have not been exposed to haki for a long time now. From now on, you will be more than just the captain of the King's Guard. The country has now reached this moment. You need to seize the time to train more talents. The entire army has been chosen by you. In the future, the application of domineering power must be popularized, and this thing may very well be the key to your final survival." Chang Nyo said seriously, "There are almost only a handful of people who can practice domineering in the 4 seas. Even in the first half of the Great Route, there are only a few people who know domineering. However, in such a quiet corner of the South Blue Sea, it has begun. Putting the practice of domineering on the military's agenda. Haki training is definitely more practical than devil fruits. In the future, there is almost a huge difference between those who have learned to use haki and those who have not learned how to use haki against enemies in the future. It is precisely because of this that Chang Nyo has paid more attention to this kind of thing from the beginning. Junhee naturally knows the importance of this matter, but now that this country is being watched by so many people, even if it wants to conduct large-scale training, it still needs to be considered in all aspects. Your Majesty, I feel that the entire country currently lacks a more suitable training venue. After all, you have said before that the practice of the 6th form of the Navy and the practice of domineering must not be known to other countries or people with intentions. But now the country is it possible to achieve a relatively secret place, but my subordinates haven't found it yet," Junhee said helplessly. Chapter 36 Uninvited Guest. Junhee was able to say this, but Chang Nyo did not refute it, but actually understood it quite well. If the true kingdom wants to develop, then someone will naturally notice such a powerful military force. Having a few hundred people should not be a big problem, but if it has tens of thousands of such troops at once, let alone the world, the government can't sit still. Even the Navy may not agree to such a thing. First, find a place to learn some basic things. You can communicate with Luosta about this matter and choose a relatively private place. In up to a year, I will find a place for you that is more private and will not be discovered. Provided for you to use for training. Chang Nyo thought for a moment and said. Now that it was a place that could not be discovered by anyone and still had enough space for so many people to train, there was only one place that Chang Nyo could think of, and that was Sky Island. Sky Island is a very special place, and it has enough privacy and space. Your Majesty, this time we have selected people of the right age from the army for training, but the number is a bit too large. The key is that even if all of our National Guards serve as instructors, we may not have enough manpower, Junhee said with some embarrassment. Then let all the National Guard be dispatched. A total of 500 people will be enough to guide these people in the early stage. There is not much time left for us. The places where we need to fight in the future may exceed your imagination. In the era of great navigation, the situation is unpredictable. Although we live in the South Blue Sea, what we will face in the future is definitely not as simple as you think. Chang Nyo said with a sigh. Yes. At first, Junhee wanted to retort. After all, after all the National Guards were withdrawn, no one would be able to protect His Majesty the King. But then he thought about it, why does his king need protection from people like himself? He is already the strongest among everyone in terms of strength, and it doesn't matter whether he is protected or not. In the South Blue Sea, there is no particularly dangerous guy at all. The current space capabilities still need to be improved before we can build a space channel. Chang Nyo looked ahead and couldn't help but think. In the following time, the Kingdom of True appeared on the headlines of newspapers almost frequently. In this era of great pirates, a country in a quiet corner of the South Blue Sea could be in such a state, let alone the kings of other countries, even those great pirates. Everyone is quite curious. But these things reported in the newspapers are almost what the Kingdom of True wants them to see. The entire True Kingdom, whether it is infrastructure construction or other aspects, has now begun to proceed in an orderly manner. In addition, the economy it has driven has even exceeded everyone's expectations, and the entire country has begun to develop in a good direction. Now there is no need for Chang Nyo to arrange other things. The country's shipbuilding industry, papermaking industry, and other retail industries are all blooming, and everyone is scrambling. But then, there were several uninvited guests in the True Palace today. They were all wearing suits and ties, as well as a pair of black sunglasses. Everyone was dressed almost the same, looking like a gangster. The faces of this group of people were all meticulous and showed no expression at all. The leader seemed to be at least about 2 meters tall. He was still a little thin overall, but the aura of a strong man could still be seen at a glance. This was half a year after the end of the first national meeting of the Kingdom of True. The sudden appearance of outsiders like them, let alone the people of this country, even though they had already appeared at the gate of the palace, the guards guarding the palace, no one was curious or surprised. After all, in the past 6 months, the True Kingdom has welcomed countless businessmen from various places, and they are also scrambling for fear of missing the opportunity to make money. I'm sorry, everyone, the palace is in front of us, so it's not convenient for you to visit. You can go to other places. At the gate of the palace, the guard said to several people patiently and respectfully. After all, there are too many tourists in this place, and sometimes you can meet several in a day, so they are not surprised and say it in a good voice. But these 6 men in suits still had cold expressions after hearing what they said. The 2-meter-tall man took off his glasses, looked at the guard with cold eyes, and then kicked him out calmly. The guard who was talking cheerfully just now was lying on the ground in an instant of a corpse. The other 3 people guarding the door were stunned for a moment after seeing this scene, but then the 2-meter-tall man did not intend to let them go. In just a moment, the 3 people fell to the ground at the same time. They seemed to be fearless and still maintained their original expressions. They did not say a word from the beginning to the end and acted so domineeringly. They did not leave after killing the people, but started walking directly towards the palace. But it was impossible to hide this kind of thing. After everyone else in the palace found out about it, they all rushed out. But the people who stay in the palace now are almost all ordinary guards with little strength. They have not been trained. As for the previous king's guards, they have already left the royal city and gone to other places to train more people. Although not all of them have left, at least the areas guarding the outer areas of the palace are now filled with ordinary people, holding guns in their hands on guard. So in front of these people are almost no different from ants. The moment they rushed out, several people had already started fighting mode. Not only were they highly powerful, but 2 of them were also devil fruit users. When facing nearly 70 soldiers rushing over to shoot, one of them directly used his demonic ability, and many bubbles began to emerge from his body in an instant, and when these bubbles began to spread to the surroundings, at any time the moment a person touches it, the bubble explodes immediately, and its power is no less than that of a cannonball. Without knowing what was happening to the soldiers, the team of more than 60 or 70 people was almost wiped out in just an instant. However, such a loud explosion also attracted other people in the palace. Chapter 37 CP2's Arrival. At the same time, more and more soldiers began to attack them, but the expressions of a few of them remained exactly the same as when they first came in, without fear or any joy, anger, sorrow, or joy. These 6 people were like robots. After the incident was over, they elegantly arranged their suits. Just as they continued to walk forward, a black figure quickly rushed over and quickly swung his leg directly at the 2-meter-tall man in the lead. But despite this, the tall man blocked it easily. Domineering? I really didn't expect that such a person could appear in a small country like the South Blue Sea. It's really surprising. The tall man at the head finally started to speak, but there was still a disdainful smile on his lips. Haruya suddenly appeared and revealed that he knew how to use haki. Although the first attack was easily dispelled, Haruya rushed forward instantly, with armed haki attached to his legs, and attacked them again. He jumped into the air quickly on the moon steps, and then fell suddenly. He wanted to use this method to directly jump down, but he completely underestimated the characters standing in front of him. The tall man took 2 steps back, and at the same time, a man wearing a red tie walked up behind him. Just when Xia hit the opponent directly, he already felt something was wrong. The opponent clearly felt the attack but had no intention of evading it. He didn't even use his hands to take all of Haruya's attack with his own body. When the attack hit the ground, the slate bricks on the surface were shattered and flew away. After the dust went up, Xia saw that the man under his feet was covered in armed domineering energy, and his whole body became completely dark. His legs were already submerged under the stone slabs, but it seemed that he had not been harmed at all. Haruya was just about to retreat, but the man with the red tie below him instantly grabbed his leg with his right hand, and then punched Haruya directly in the stomach with his left hand. Even though he reacted quickly, Ji immediately used both hands to protect his body, but he still did not escape this strong impact. The man with the red tie just punched him, and he was knocked away and hit the wall behind him. At this moment, even the wall had been hit and cracked. When Xia fell, he was already vomiting blood. The obvious serious injury even made him unable to stand up again. These people are already the most powerful existences he has encountered so far, the kind that are so powerful that no one can match them. Who are you? Why did you force your way into my royal palace? Xia asked weakly. We are CP2 here to find your king, Genji Nagano. The tall man standing at the front said in a cold and mechanical voice. Boss, why are you talking so much nonsense with an ant? Just go up and trample him to death. The man in the red tie smiled sinisterly, and then slowly moved towards the direction where Haruya was squatting. The expression on his face now means that he wants to play. These people don't care at all about the purpose of their coming here. But the governance in front of them also made these guys a little interested. After all, it is still very rare to see people using domineering in the world. The key is that since they saw it here today, although a person's strength is not considered it's very strong, but I can barely play with myself. When the man with the red tie walked up to Xia, he said with a smile on his face and a look of disdain, You ants in the South Blue Sea. It's rare that you gave us a pleasant thought today, so now I will give you the last gift. Cheng is ready. With a wicked smile on his lips, he said that he was about to use his ability. A pure white bubble instantly appeared on his hand, and then just when he was about to put the bubble into Xia's body, it suddenly appeared someone grabbed his hand instantly. Is it possible that all CP2 guys are like you? I really don't know what those 5 old men from Wulaoxing are thinking. Why do they train you useless trash? Chang Nyo suddenly appeared, with a look of disdain on his lips and began to mock them. His Majesty! Xia shouted weakly, his voice almost inaudible. Who are you? The man with the red tie who had looked arrogant just now suddenly turned cold as he looked at Chang Nyo and asked in a low tone. Come here, send me for treatment and go for treatment. Chang Nyo ignored the red tie man's words and shouted somewhere else. At this time, 2 people jumped out of nowhere and arrived at Xia's side in an instant. Then they picked him up and started to leave. But when they were about to leave, another one of CP2 stopped directly in front of the 3 of them. Interesting little guy, you must be King True, right? I didn't expect that you actually know about the 5 old stars. Tell me, how did you know about it? The tall man came over, wearing sunglasses on his face, without any expression, and asked calmly. Chang Nyo looked at the corpses on the ground in front of him. He had lost a lot of people this time. He didn't look angry, and he still had a smile on his face. Seeing the tall man walking towards him, Chang Nyo's originally relatively calm face instantly turned into a violent state. CP2? Since you dare to come to my country, or even come to my palace to kill people, are you ready to die? Just when the man with the red tie was wondering if there was something wrong with King Toru's brain, Chang Nyo's entire body disappeared in an instant, and they didn't even notice each other's movements when they used their haki. When he appeared again, he appeared directly next to a short man who blocked Haruya and the 3 of them. His reaction was very fast. Chang Nyo kicked him directly in the head, but he subconsciously used his right hand to block. However, Chang Nyo's current mood can be imagined. Even though he had already generated strong strength, even if he blocks it, it will fly dozens of meters away in an instant. The two people who were supporting Zaya immediately disappeared from this area with Zaya after seeing this state. After something happened here in the palace, the whole place was quickly sealed off, and all news was contained within the palace. What an interesting little guy. After so many years, I never thought that someone would dare to resist the CP department. The man in the red tie didn't seem angry, Chong Nyo's appearance seemed to bring him unlimited passion. Chapter 38 Space Boundary. Chong Nyo looked at the look of several people. Even though the man with the red tie said so, it was really him who should be angry now. Tell me, how did you know about the 5 old stars of the world government? The tall man took 2 steps towards Chong Nyo and asked in a cold voice. First tell me the purpose of your coming here. Wu Lioxing asked you to come here, right? It should be to inform me to join the world government. Chong Nyo asked with a smile still on his face. That's right. That's enough. Now that the matter has been conveyed, shouldn't it be up to me, King True, to bring a little fun to you? Chong Nyo said with a provocative look. Ho ho, it's interesting. The tall man said with a smile. Seal the palace and prohibit anyone from disturbing my communication with the adults in the CP department. Chong Nyo didn't know who he was talking to, and no one responded. Then Chong Nyo looked at the tall man and said, there are the treasures of the Toru kingdom behind the palace. I wonder if you are interested in going and taking a look? After all, my palace is the only place where I live now. If it is damaged, then but it's not good. Chong Nyo's successive provocations were quite obvious. A subordinate behind the tall man looked at him worriedly and whispered, Boss, if we make things worse, it will have an impact on us. Hey, no one will care about this barren land in the South Blue Sea. The tall man said disdainfully. Since there is no problem, please come with me. Chong Nyo smiled and said politely. The mountain behind the palace must pass through the palace, without any exception. After all, Chong Nyo often has to practice there. These guys are still good choices as whetstones, although I don't know what the opponent's strength is. Gago ya, you came just in time. Inform Junhee to prepare fruits for the CP adults and ask him to deliver them to the back mountain as soon as possible. As soon as they reached the door of the palace, Gago ya suddenly appeared, making Chong Nyo smile and say. Ah! Gago ya didn't understand what it meant yet, but seeing that Chong Nyo had begun to lead several people in another direction, he could only whisper, what's going on? But she was not stupid, and she realized something instantly. She could only start communicating with Junhee through the phone bug, and then informed the other party of the situation here, mainly about fruits. After passing through an arch, the outside is completely different. There are all big trees here, and what appears in front of you is a long staircase, leading directly to a huge platform where Chong Nyo usually practices. It's extremely quiet here, not even the chirping of birds. Among the 6 CP department personnel behind Chong Nyo, except for one of the guys who was seriously injured by Chong Nyo's kick and was a little weak, everyone else's eyes had a certain determination to win. The platform is a venue of almost more than 20,000 square meters, which is more than enough for combat needs. And it's quite a distance from the palace, so there's no need to worry about accidental injuries. Where's the treasure? The tall man walked behind Chong Nyo and asked impatiently after walking for so long. You haven't reached the place yet, why are you in such a hurry? The world government has trained you, so you won't be able to endure even this little time, right? Chong Nyo said with a hint of sarcasm. But this group of people didn't care at this time. Anyway, everything that followed was insignificant. Walking on this long and narrow path, Chong Nyo walked in front and a few people followed behind. For the CP people, there was no need to worry at all. They had enough confidence in their own strength. Everyone has their own little thoughts. Chang Nyo forced himself to hold back his inner anger. Facing these people, he was not completely sure, but now that he had reached this point, there was no way out. I wonder what I should call you. As Chang Nyo was walking, he suddenly asked curiously. CP2 Division Chief, Alvia Omura. The tall man said directly without refusing. While chatting, they were still walking forward and seemed to have a relatively relaxed atmosphere. You, the king, talk too much nonsense. Where is the treasure? The man in the red tie asked impatiently. Wait a moment, eat some fruit first. As soon as he finished speaking, Junhee appeared in the square with a few people and various fruits in his hands. Your Majesty, what you want? Junhee said respectfully next to Chang Nyo. Take them down, don't come up without orders. But your majesty. Nothing to worry about, just obey orders. Chang Nyo suddenly turned his face, looked at Junhee with a gloomy expression, and said in a cold voice. Yes, your majesty. Junhee had no choice but to bow and say, and then started to prepare to leave. I really didn't expect that the small true kingdom would have so many masters. It seems like we need to send people from other CP departments over to take a look. The man with the red tie said to Chang Nyo with a smile on his face. Then it's better to wait until everyone leaves here before we discuss it. Chang Nyo's voice was no longer the same as before, with his back turned to these people and an angry look on his face. As soon as he finished speaking, he stamped his right foot down suddenly, and a sky blue barrier suddenly rose up across the square. Devil fruit. The tall man looked at the barriers rising around him and was very curious, but there was no worry in his tone. One of the members even ran to the edge of the barrier to try it out. After an attack was carried out, it immediately turned into stone and there was no ripple at all. Boss, this barrier is very weird. After the tall man heard this, a sinister smile appeared on his lips, and he didn't look too surprised. King True, what do you mean? Do you still want to start a war with our CP department? The man in the red tie asked directly. Chang Nyo slowly turned around and looked at the group of people, with a half smile on his lips, and then said in a flirtatious tone, It's really interesting what you said. If you don't do anything when you come to our true palace, just kill us. With so many soldiers, is it possible that in your eyes, you really think that the entire world is under the control of your world government? In that case, why are you talking so much nonsense? The face of the man with the red tie turned from the smile just now to an instant coldness, and countless bubbles began to emit from his body, and under his push, these bubbles all flew in the direction of Chang Nyo. Others continued to watch quietly. Chang Nyo was calm at all and had a slight smile. He didn't take the red tie and the blue one seriously. Chapter 39 The beginning of the battle. The spatial ability Devil Fruit suddenly showed its power at this moment. All the bubbles disappeared the moment they approached Chang Nyo. However, at this moment, hundreds of kilometers away on the sea, explosion scenes kept appearing. However, there was a pirate ship sailing on the sea. At this moment, the people on the ship were already frightened and overwhelmed. They never imagined that there would be such a terrifying and strange scene on the West Sea. The man in the red tie who was fighting had now noticed something was wrong. All his demonic abilities seemed to be contained, and he could not touch the opponent at all. The group of people who were destined to win finally showed shocked looks at this moment. What exactly is this kid's devil fruit ability? The man in the red tie said angrily. Superhuman space ability, I didn't expect that this devil fruit would finally appear after 100 years. The tall man had a wary look on his face, with indescribable shock on his face. He understood this thing very clearly. After all, those people above who formed the CP department wanted to get one of the geometric devil fruits. It is this. Everyone, stop looking, come together and take down the opponent. The tall man directly started shouting orders. Muramasa. When Chang Nyo saw that these people were already in serious mode, he also shouted directly. Then Demon Sword Muramasa appeared from nowhere and floated quietly in front of Chang Nyo. When you come to my kingdom of True, you actually dare to kill my soldiers. Since you are here today, then stay here and use your lives to atone for your sins. Chang Nyo held the demon sword Muramasa in one hand and pointed at them with the other hand and said directly in a cold voice. What are you still doing? Take it down. After the tall man shouted loudly, he quickly rushed to Chang Nyo's side and started to attack directly. If the ability of the space system is used well, it will be much more powerful than the natural system, and it may even be completely unsolvable. The tall man kicked Chang Nyo with a domineering kick, but Chang Nyo standing here seemed to be a mirror image. His attack went directly through Chang Nyo's body. Even though he was already equipped with domineering power, in the end, it was not even possible. It has no effect at all. Only now did they start to look serious. When several other people saw this, they all rushed forward. At this moment, in the palace, at the place connected to the back mountain, hundreds of people were fully armed and standing. Each of them was wearing a mask, a uniform white mask, with only 2 eyes exposed. They are also wearing uniform black combat uniforms. The purpose of this group of people staying here is not to let anyone disturb their Majesty the King. The battle inside is still going on, and no matter how loud the noise is, those on the periphery can't hear the slightest sound. However, Chang Nyo, who stood there and was attacked by them for several minutes, suddenly smiled, and then slowly pulled out the demon sword Muramasa in his hand. The powerful and sharp aura once again filled the enchantment space. "Everyone, be careful, this knife is not simple." The tall man began to warn these people. There were actually only 5 of them who could participate in the attack. The other one was seriously injured by Chong Nyo's blow before, and now he didn't have much resistance at all. "King Taru, is it possible that you want to go against the world government?" Seeing that he couldn't defeat the opponent, the man in the red tie threatened directly. "You don't need to tell me this. This time, your purpose of coming here has been achieved. Joining the world government is something that has been decided before. This does not have much effect on me, but since you have come to inform me, let's go with the flow. I will still do it. But you dare not act recklessly in my country and hurt my soldiers. This is the worst decision you have ever made in your life. Besides, whether it's life or death, what does the final outcome have to do with the kingdom of True?" Chong Nyo said with a smile on his face. "King True, I advise you to stop being stubborn. As long as you go back with us, I can guarantee that no one in the True Kingdom will suffer any loss. If you continue, the entire True Kingdom will be destroyed. I will be buried with you for your stupidity." The tall Omura began to say threateningly. "Is your CP department all like this? You start to threaten when you feel that you can't defeat it, but have you realized another problem, that is, in the South Blue Sea, if you die, it seems that it will not have any impact on our Kingdom of True. What loss? Or, who can prove that you disappeared in the South Blue Sea?" Chong Nyo was not moved at all and still said with a smile. He doesn't want to talk nonsense with these people at all now. The demon sword Muramasa has already been pulled out. If he doesn't harvest it, there is no way he can insert it back again. After possessing the spatial ability, his sword skills have broken through at least 2 levels. Chang Nyo started to accumulate strength, and there was no need to use the Haki blessing at all. None of the opponents had natural devil fruit abilities, so there was no need to expend too much energy to fight in the beginning. This time it was not just a simple battle. Chong Nyo wanted to use these people to hone himself and test the extent of his current strength. The fact that Omura can become the leader of CP2 shows that the opponent's strength is certainly not simple. Normally, I train alone and have no chance to test myself. However, this time they came to my door, so I don't need to worry too much about it. Omura has now realized the seriousness of the matter. Although Wu Liaoxing ordered his people to come over and let the Toru Kingdom join the world government, there was no time limit for them to come. They were already delayed. If there was a problem, there really aren't many people who would consider the Toru Kingdom. Nanhai is already relatively weak, so for a character to appear who can compete with the CP department is simply a fantasy. So for this kind of thing that is impossible to happen at all, other people will not think about it at all. Chong Nyo grasped this point, and if the problem of the corpse is properly dealt with when the time comes, then this matter can be solved without anyone noticing. "Kova, let's deal with King True, hurry up and find a way to open this barrier," Omura ordered. There is nothing he can do now. The other party's ability to control space is completely beyond what they and others can handle. The most important thing is that if the spatial ability is used properly, it is equivalent to a person who is not domineering dealing with a person with natural abilities. Chapter 40 Another Carelessness. Chong Nyo was never in a hurry from beginning to end. He always wanted to see what tricks this group of people could come up with. Anyway, this group of people are now lambs to be slaughtered. No matter how bad the final result is, even though they are relatively powerful, if their own space barrier is not removed, these guys will not even think about leaving this place. From the first glance, Omaluo and the others seem to be together very often, and their cooperation is completely flawless. For a few of them, even a natural-type devil fruit user like the Admiral would most likely fall into the hands of these people. However, except for one of their original 6 people who was seriously injured, the other one had to find a way. There are only 4 people left who have walked out of this barrier. The strength of the 4 of them cannot be underestimated. So far, only 2 of the 6 have demonstrated devil fruit abilities. The other 4 still don't know what the situation is. Chang Nyo no longer wanted to talk nonsense with them. After accumulating his power, he waved the demon sword Muramasa directly and shouted flying sword style, Long Xiang Shan. Suddenly, nearly a dozen sword lights began to fly towards these 4 people in an instant. The speed was so fast that if these people weren't very experienced in fighting, just this move would be enough to kill them. Long Xiang flash attacks from bottom to top, and Qin launched 10 attacks instantly. It is so powerful that it can tear the earth apart almost instantly. Omoluo arrived not far from Changnyo in an instant. After using his knowledge to sense his own danger, he quickly began to retreat, and then he saw 10 sword lights attacking towards him and the others. The sword glowed blood red, and 10 sharp blade slash marks were directly formed on the floor of the marble slab. "Boss, you didn't expect this kid to be a swordsman?" The man in the red tie shouted in surprise. No matter how much they thought about it, they never considered that King Tru was such a powerful man. Even if the opponent doesn't have devil fruit abilities, just relying on the current swordsman's swordsmanship is enough to fight them. Don't talk nonsense. The opponent's attack is very sharp. If you are not careful, you will die. Be very alert. Our main goal is to contain the opponent until we find a way to break the barrier. He will suffer in the future. Omura's eyes were cold and his expression was very angry, and he gave orders directly to everyone. When he finished speaking, everyone turned on the serious mode, which was different from the seriousness just now. At this moment, they seemed to have begun to gather all their strength. Omura also began to change. He was still a normal person, but now it seemed as if something was about to burst out of his body. The perfect suit on his body also burst apart. After everything was over, Changnyo discovered that this guy Omura was actually a devil fruit user, and he was also an animal-type devil fruit. Silver Moon Wolf, the animal devil fruit phantom beast, it seems that we really caught a big guy today. Changnyo looked at Omura, and a smile began to appear on his lips. He has also seen the devil fruit illustrated book. This thing is definitely one of the best among animal devil fruits. Being able to be the leader of CP, I have already guessed that the other party is definitely not simple, but I didn't expect that he would hide such a backhand. Then other people must not be as simple as they think. The abilities of these people have now been determined. The first one is the man with the red tie. This guy's devil fruit ability is the superhuman bubble fruit ability. He can create bubble-like things and produce violent explosions. Using shock waves attack enemies. The second one is the guy who was seriously injured when Changnyo came up. As for the devil fruit ability he used, it has not been discovered yet. From the time he was injured until now, he has no way to take action when he gets into the water, so he can only sit next to him. As for the third one, who is now Omura, an animal phantom species, Changnyo has reason to believe that the remaining 3 people are definitely devil fruit users. But while Changnyo was still thinking, his body suddenly seemed to be out of control, and even the demon sword Muramasa in his hand fell to the ground instantly. In this situation, Omura rushed up instantly and punched Changnyo directly in the abdomen. This time he did not attack the air, but actually attacked Changnyo. This attack directly sent Changnyo flying backwards for more than 10 meters. Fortunately, when the attack was about to reach him, Changnyo instantly regained consciousness and protected his body with armed domineering. But even so, for a strong man like Omura, his attack was enough to seriously injure Changnyo. After Changnyo fell to the ground, he slowly stood up and squatted down. He still couldn't help but a trace of blood flowing out of the corner of his mouth. Now we have figured out the status of at least one of the other 3 people. Being able to use mental attacks is really hard to guard against. Mater, you are so careless. You have advised yourself so many times, but in the end you still made such a low-level mistake. Changnyo squatted on the ground in some pain, but what made him more painful was that he had already walked such a long way and absorbed so many lessons, and he still had not long enough to remember. He had clearly reminded himself before that no matter what he encountered in the future, what kind of person should not only go all out, but at least raise the highest level of vigilance. However, facing the early attack from this group of people, Changnyo was obviously a little arrogant and ignored the detail of defense, which was taken advantage of by the enemy. If it weren't for his current strength, Omura's attack just now would have been enough to kill him. While the other party is injured, go ahead. Omura shouted quickly. He didn't want to miss such a good opportunity now. Although the opponent had the ability of the Space Devil Fruit, they could also see that Changnyo's actual combat experience was much weaker in comparison. Changnyo squatted on the ground and took a deep breath, then slowly stood up. At this time, they had already rushed over. Barrier. A blue light curtain suddenly appeared around Changnyo, blocking the rest of them directly from his body. But he seemed to have too much confidence in his space fruit. The moment Omura rushed up, he directly transformed into the form of the Silver Moon Wolf and attacked the space barrier with a claw. Originally, Changnyo considered the barrier to be an absolute defense. Several cracks appeared instantly. Although these cracks are slowly compounding, if the opponent attacks faster, then even if he hides behind this, he will still not be very safe. Muramasa. Following Chang Nyo's shout, demon sword Muramasa, who was still lying on the ground, instantly flew towards the barrier. Chapter 41 Space Mirror. After holding the sword again, Chang Nyo slowly inserted Muramasa into the scabbard, staring at one of them with stern eyes. Chang Nyo will never make the same mistake again, but the guy who knows how to attack mentally should indeed be considered the most difficult one. Therefore, all Chang Nyo's attacks will be focused on that one person. The opponent looked at Chang Nyo and wanted to use spiritual attacks again, but Chang Nyo, who was already prepared, had already discovered this result. Double Dragon Flash. Chang Nyo instantly removed the protective barrier and drew his sword twice in succession. This time is completely different from before. Double Dragon Flash is a relatively powerful existence in Fuxian Yujian style. After drawing his sword twice, 2 flying dragons suddenly appeared in the entire area, and he headed directly towards the number that could use spiritual attacks. But at this moment, Chang Nyo was not in a hurry to put Muramasa into the scabbard. Instead, he was watching the 2 flying dragons flying out, his attack trend. This attack was only aimed at one person, the man who knew how to attack mentally. He was no longer calm at this moment and hurriedly began to retreat, but his speed was not as fast as Chang Nyo's attack. Just when the opponent was preparing to use a strong defense, Chang Nyo instantly inserted the sword into the scabbard and shouted Long Ming Flash. This is completely different from the previous attack. All the previous attacks were drawing and slashing, but this time it was inserting the knife, and using the rapid inserting skill to erupt with ultrasonic waves to disrupt the enemy. After inserting the knife, the ultrasonic waves emitted by Long Ming Shan instantly made these people squat down and cover their ears. After all, Long Ming Shan is the ultimate move in the Fuxian sword style, and he has demonstrated this swordsmanship to its fullest at this moment. After the opponent stopped defending, the 2 dragons instantly penetrated the man who knew how to attack mentally. Although after the attack penetrated, this guy seemed to be fine. At the moment when others were stunned, he began to slowly fall to the ground. There was no trace of scars on his body, not even blood. Die. After seeing his companion fall, Omura could no longer control himself. Silver Moon Wolf's eyes were already glowing with blood-red light, and several other people did not hesitate to use Chang Nyo's attack with all their strength. This time, every time Omura attacks, a strong light emanates from the wolf claws, and every attack can cause several deep cracks to appear on the ground. If it weren't for the ability of the space system, Chang Nyo wouldn't dare to have a head-on confrontation with such a person. Moreover, the entire space is filled with a large number of bubbles. Once he touches any of these things, there will be a series of explosions. In other words, the man in the red tie used this method to control Chang Nyo's next actions. The other 2 people are not idle either. The speed of the 2 of them is as fast as lightning and flint, and every attack is powerful and sharp. Faced with such cooperation from the 4 people, Chang Nyo could only use the ability of space to stay here for defense. But continuing on forever is definitely not an option. Now he can only watch like this temporarily so that he can find out the flaws between these people. Everyone's attacks seemed to be extremely sharp at this moment, and they were using all their strength. Even if Chang Nyo made any mistakes, the opponent could be killed on the spot. But when the ability is activated, the Chang Nyo in front of them is no longer himself, but belongs to a space mirror. The real Chang Nyo has long been hidden behind this space. The attacks by Omura and others lasted for nearly 10 minutes, and Chang Nyo also stood there for nearly 10 minutes. Seeing how several people were panting, each of them was now afraid. After all, these people didn't know much about the space-type devil fruit abilities, but in this state, their attacks had almost no effect. When using space skills, Chang Nyo himself has already revealed a big shortcoming, that is, he is in a state of nothingness and others cannot attack him. But at the same time, he cannot attack others at all and can only maintain his original position. The state stood quietly in place. But the moment they stopped, Chang Nyo suddenly moved, and Muramasa, the demon sword in his hand, quickly pulled out again. Seeing this scene, Omura immediately shouted, "Get away!" The others seemed to be frightened and began to scatter in an instant, and began to use their domineering force to defend themselves. The key is that Chang Nyo did not intend to give them a chance this time. As soon as one of them opened his defense, Chang Nyo was already in front of him, with a smile on his lips, as if lying in his ear and saying goodbye. The original new red color of the Muramasa in his hand was suddenly attached with domineering energy. In the state of armed domineering blessing, Chong Nyo swung the sword with his right hand, pressed his left hand on the back of the sword, and directly penetrated the opponent's throat from top to bottom. Even though this guy has used armed haki to attach to his body, the final result is still ineffective. Although this knife did not cut off his head, it still made him cover his neck uncontrollably, and blood began to flow out quickly from his fingers. Seeing this, the other people no longer had any chance to communicate, and their attacks were completely useless against the other party. Kova, how's your search going? Omura shouted angrily and helplessly to his companions who were looking for a way to break the barrier. Boss, all my attacks have no effect on this barrier. I am speeding up my search now. Kova also looked anxious and kept testing the surroundings of the barrier. He didn't miss any place. Omura felt that facing Chong Nyo this time was the most uncomfortable thing in his life. He couldn't attack him. He had already lost 3 people on his side. Although the other party was also injured, at least it didn't seem to matter for now. Look. However, he never considered that even if the barrier was broken, they would not be able to leave the True Kingdom at all. The people standing outside were now waiting in full formation. Junhee stood in front of these people, always sensing every move inside with his sense of sight. Whenever anything happens, he will rush in with this group of people without hesitation. People outside are not aware of what happened here, and even the dead soldiers in the palace have already begun to deal with it. Even the ground is now spotless. Chapter 42 Heavy Damage. The battle between the two parties has lasted for almost half an hour. Although Chong Nyo suffered some injuries, as long as he is handled properly, this injury will not hurt him. But Omoluo and the others are different. Now they have become ants on a hot pot. King True, do you really plan to do this to such an extreme extent? Omano asked in a cold voice. Do you think there is any use for me to stop now? I don't think you, the leader of CP, can choose to let us go after leaving my country. Instead of worrying about your future life, it is better to let you stay here. It's pretty good here. There was a sinister smile on Chong Nyo's lips, and he looked quite evil. Boss, why bother talking nonsense to this guy? As long as you kill him, the barrier will be broken. When the time comes, we will definitely let this country bury him with him. The man in the red tie said fiercely. Haha, don't you think it's funny when I say this? Do you really think that's all I have here? Chong Nyo said directly with a smile, because the other party only knew how to say harsh words, and he didn't know how many times he said it from the beginning to now, but the final result is still here without the slightest change, it is just for fun. The man with the red tie also knew that if he did not crack the opponent's spatial ability, it would not matter how long they stayed here. On the contrary, when they were tired, a casual blow from the opponent might kill them. Geik, please stay close to me from now on. Don't act rashly to seize this kid's weakness and kill him with one strike. Omura didn't want to think about other things anymore. The king obviously didn't want them to leave here. When using the color perception, he had already discovered that there were many strong people outside. Although he was very surprised, the most important goal now was to seize the time to deal with this little guy in front of him. As for what to do then, he could only let's look at the situation. After receiving Omura's order, the man in the red tie seized the opportunity and moved towards him as soon as possible. The man named Kova no longer devoted himself to finding the exit of the barrier, but instead moved closer to them. Of the 6 people who came with CP2, 2 are dead and 1 is seriously injured. There are only 3 of them left, and the little guy on the other side doesn't know when he will attack. Suddenly, they, a group of strong people who once thought they were self-righteous, everyone has already felt the crisis coming. You really don't think that the space power devil fruit can only be used for defense, right? Chang Nyo suddenly looked at the remaining 3 people with a smile on his lips and said. There was nothing wrong with the other 2 people, except that Omura's face suddenly turned pale. These 2 people didn't know the situation, but as the CP leader, he naturally knew too much. The old guys above gave them the main task of all CPS, which was to find those devil fruits, including the abilities of the space fruits. This leader had already known it. The superhuman space devil fruit is definitely a bug-like existence among devil fruits, a completely despairing ability. In this mountainside, the intensity of the attacks within the barrier was so great, but not even the leaves on the outside of the key barrier moved. Omura had obviously begun to panic. At first, he thought that the other party only knew the defensive function of the space devil fruit, but now it was obvious from the other party's words that this was not the case. This made him a little nervous. Ghost guessed, suppress the opponent's actions. Kova is responsible for assisting side attacks. Don't let the opponent have room to fight back. Omura hurriedly began to give instructions. As long as the other party could not use attacks, they would at least have hope of survival. He didn't dare to bet now. If Chongnyo really knew the ability to attack in space, then for these people, there would be only one way to go, and that was to wait for death. After the two received the order, they quickly began to besiege. The man in the red tie began to release a kind of bubble that had never been released before. This time it was colorful and at least 3 meters in diameter. Both of you, please stay away. I will use this to die with him today and break this barrier for you. The man in the red tie held the huge bubble above his head, as if he was ready to die with Chongnyo. But things have reached this point, how could Chongnyo allow him to release such a thing in his own territory? But just when he was about to take action, the man named Kova rushed forward instantly. Until now, Chongnyo has not learned about the opponent's abilities and can only passively activate the defensive state. Jump. After Kova's attack failed, Chongnyo instantly used space jump. This is a short-distance space jump method, and unlike teleportation, jumping can allow him to appear anywhere in this space. Small. Dragon Nest //. Before Kova opened his mouth to remind him, Chongnyo appeared directly behind the man in the red tie, and with a roaring voice, he started to draw his sword. The moment his knife fell, Omura appeared beside Chongnyo at the same time. Chongnyo, who was currently under attack, had no way to defend himself. He could only let Omura's silver moon wolf form attack him with one claw. They used the man with the red tie as the price to hit Chongnyo hard again. This attack was not without mercy. 3 deep, bone-visible wounds suddenly appeared on Chongnyo's chest. Moreover, his whole body also hit the edge of the barrier heavily. The moment he fell to the ground, Chongnyo, who was only 16 or 17 years old, endured the pain and his hands began to tremble uncontrollably. This attack was probably the closest he had come to death. If it hadn't been for years of practice that had greatly improved his body functions, I'm afraid he would have completely burped this time. But even so, he could only endure this attack. The remaining 2 people had no sympathy at all for the fact that their companion was dead. They were glaring with anger at Chongnyo, who was seriously injured and leaning on the edge of the barrier. The only thing that could give them any idea was to kill the other party quickly. As for the rest can only be understood slowly after looking back. The man with the red tie who had always been arrogant on the other side was now dead. Trading one of his own serious injuries for the death of the other person may be a good deal in some senses, but for Chongnyo, this time he still underestimated the other person. Chapter 43 Healing Body Drawn by Lottery. He obviously had such a huge advantage, but he ended up like this in the end. But all the combat experience was tempered in the battle. He had no regrets about this injury. But once this happens now, it may be difficult to control the next situation. He didn't have any super recovery ability, so he could only endure the pain and continue to deal with the next 2 people. Fu. I've lost so many people, but I'm still not dead. Is it really surprising? Omalo still maintains his werewolf form, because in this form, he is at his strongest whether attacking, defending, or moving. He didn't see Chongnyo like this. He was already getting carried away because of a small victory. Instead, he kept an alert and nervous expression. Even though Chongnyo was seriously injured now, he still looked that cautious. I'm not dead yet? Isn't it too early to be happy? Chongnyo said weakly. His face had begun to turn pale, and the wounds on his body were bleeding uncontrollably. Junhee, who was standing outside, sensed what was happening inside, and instantly came to the edge of the barrier and looked inside. But he couldn't go in. Even if he stood on the outside and yelled, he wouldn't be able to hear it from inside, and what was said inside could not be heard outside at all. That's what you said. How can you possibly kill the 2 of us now when you look like this? King True, you just need to capture him without mercy. Kova stood aside and said with the same smile. Now that it has become like this, for them, it seems that they have a chance to win. Chongnyo leaned on Muramasa, the demon sword, and stood up with difficulty. He realized that he didn't have much time. If he couldn't solve it as soon as possible, then there was a real possibility that those who would greet him would be taken away by them. Although his own people are outside, the strength of these 2 guys means that if they want to run away, the group of people probably won't be able to stop them. The most important thing is that once they go out, they will definitely communicate with people outside through the phone bug. This is the main reason why Chongnyo doesn't want the barrier to spread at all. Once he falls into a coma, this barrier may naturally disperse. At that time, not only himself, but also the country may fall into endless war. Chongnyo held the knife. No matter what the situation was, he must keep these two people in the barrier. System, is there any medicine that can quickly heal wounds? Chongnyo began to communicate with each other in the system space in his mind. He is not fighting alone at the key point. He is a bug himself. With the system, he can be said to have immortality. No matter what the situation is, as long as you have money, other things don't matter at all. Although Chongnyo is now so seriously injured, Chongnyo is not worried at all, but dealing with two people with such a seriously injured body may be really difficult or even impossible. Answer: if the host itself is seriously injured, you can purchase related rapid self-healing capabilities. You have a balance of 1,050 million belly remaining in the system space. Do you want to choose randomly? The mechanical voice of the system came over, but now was the time to think about it. He already looked helpless and had no choice at all. At this point, the system actually asked him to make a random selection. He had already known that this thing was purely equivalent to a lottery. Over the past few years, he had no idea how much money he had invested in it. In the end, even men's underwear came out, which made him vomit a mouthful of blood. On the ground. This so-called lottery method is really too deceptive and has no effect at all. When he first started buying the fully automatic textile machine, he had already tried it again, but he didn't expect that what came out was a set of women's underwear. Since then, he has been full of distrust of the word random. But now he has to deal with the two people in front of him at the same time. He has no time to choose carefully. He can only endure the pain and frown and answer agree. After saying these two words, Chongnyo paid no attention to the content inside, but thought that no matter how bad luck was, a bandage with the worst healing properties would not appear. Just by taking a glance, Chongnyo had already discovered that the system space directly cleared his balance to zero, and then began to spin something similar to a turntable. Standing outside the barrier, Junhee was so angry that his hands were completely covered with armed domineering energy. He hammered the ground anxiously, and the entire marble slab became cracked inch by inch under his punches. But he just couldn't get in. Seeing that His Majesty the King had become like this helpless feeling came directly to his heart. However, Omura inside the barrier looked at Chongnyo, who had been silent for a long time, and stopped maintaining the form of the silver moon wolf. After returning to his own appearance, he was completely shirtless. He took out a pair of sunglasses from somewhere and continued to wear them on his face. King Taru, you should have accepted your fate by now. Wouldn't it be better to just stay like this? Omura seemed to already feel that he had a chance to win, and the other Kawa also felt the same. But at this time, Chongnyo suddenly stood up and the wounds on his body were healing rapidly. This scene instantly made the two people's nerves tense again. None of them thought about what happened. Why did it suddenly become like this? Among the devil fruit abilities in this world, it is not that there are no abilities that can heal oneself quickly, but the king in front of him has obviously eaten the devil fruit's space-based ability, and it is impossible to have other abilities. But now that the facts are before their eyes, it will have no effect on them to think about it. Omura, I wonder who you were talking about just now. After Chongnyo stood up, he raised his head and looked at the tall Omura with a strange smile on his lips. In fact, he is also confused now. He has always behaved randomly, but this time he actually did something for him that he couldn't believe. After the roulette wheel in the system space ended, it involved abilities related to healing ability, and finally it was fixed on the fairy body in the world of Naruto. Not to mention the billion Baileys this time, even if it is 10 billion or 100 billion, this thing is completely enough. Why not say that this unexpected gain and loss made him extremely surprised, because the moment he got it, Chongnyo already felt like he was dreaming. Chapter 44 The End. Suddenly gaining the most powerful bloodline ability in the Naruto world, Chongnyo sometimes felt like what he would become in the future. But first of all, the body's self-healing ability is really not something to be boasted about. The wounds on the body after such serious injuries are healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. And in other aspects, especially physical fitness, I feel like I have endless energy in my body. The use of spatial abilities is almost a mental drain. Even if there is no systematic ability in the future, Chongnyo already feels that with the current situation, he can be invincible in the entire pirate world. Omeluo felt like a fool at this moment. He was obviously hurt so badly, but now he was full of life. He really didn't know what words to use to express his inner shock. Just now, the two of them looked determined to win, but now, Omura couldn't help but start to take 2 steps back. It seems that the matter should be over. Thank you very much for the lesson you taught me this time. Changnyo smiled slightly, and then the whole person disappeared in an instant. He has now mastered the ability of space jumping to a high level. As long as it is within a limited range, he can ignore all obstacles and reach anywhere he wants in an instant. The previous physical consumption coupled with the mental consumption now, Omura's entire fighting spirit has been almost flattened. Regarding the sudden appearance of Changnyo, this experienced guy suddenly made a mistake. Changnyo suddenly appeared behind him and punched him directly in the chest. Moreover, his fists were still attached with armament-colored haki. A powerful impact directly caused Omura to hit the edge of the barrier from the middle position. As for Kova, this guy is now dominated by fear. The once arrogant CP department has now become a lost dog. But this time Changnyo did not intend to kill the 2 people directly. Instead, with a smile on his lips, he directly removed the barrier space that blocked them. The moment the barrier disappeared, Kova wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to escape quickly, and even his boss began to ignore him. But the moment the barrier dissipated, Junhee had already discovered Kova's thoughts. He rushed forward in an instant and before Kova could leave, he kicked him out, and then took out a restraining ring from his waist. Kova's strength should be higher than that of Junhee, but he had no intention of fighting at all, so he was suppressed by Junhee with one move. After subduing Kawa, Junhee got up and ran to Changnyo. He asked with worry and concern, "How are you, Your Majesty?" Because he had clearly seen that His Majesty the King had been seriously injured just now. Although he acted as if nothing happened now, the damage to his clothes during his lifetime was enough to prove the extent of their battle just now. Changnyo just smiled and said, "Do you think I'm in trouble?" Junhee was stunned, but he didn't say anything more and just stared at him curiously. "Take these 3 people down and interrogate them about the world government. I want to know more from them. If you can't find out, just tell me and we can just bring out the devil fruit." Changnyo said that he didn't have much hope for these people. 3 of the 6 people who came were dead and now only 3 were left, one of whom was still seriously injured. Although Omura was not willing to give in at all, now he knew very well that there was no way at all. After taking down these people, Junhee took out a golden telephone bug from Omura's arms. Junhee looked curious about this relatively novel guy. Just when he was about to test it, Changnyo suddenly appeared beside him and snatched the thing instantly. "Junhee, don't press this thing randomly. Do you know what this is?" Changnyo said calmly that he did not blame Junhee, but wanted to educate him about the function of this thing. "Your Majesty, this thing should be a phone bug, right?" Junhee asked doubtfully. "You are right, this is a phone bug, but it is different from ordinary ones. The golden phone bug, its function is to summon the Navy's so-called demon-slaying order, which is 10 warships, and there are also 10 lieutenant generals participating. Massive attacks coming in. As long as you press it, the Navy will automatically know the location and conduct an indiscriminate attack on our royal city," Changnyo said. After Junhee listened to these words, cold sweat began to break out on his head. He did not feel that His Majesty the King was deceiving him. After all, he had never seen such a perverted phone bug. He could have such a big one. The power can also be imagined. And although the identities of these people are not clear to Junhee, it can be judged from their strength that they are definitely not ordinary people. Things can finally come to an end now, but their surprises are yet to come. 2 of the fruits that were originally sent here have quietly changed. Especially one of the apples has a light yellow pattern with a circular texture on it, which looks very extraordinary. This light yellow devil fruit should be the guy who knows how to attack the mind. As for the other one, it is used by the man with the red tie. These 2 devil fruits are already 2 of the more powerful ones in the devil fruit series, especially the superhuman psychic devil fruit, which is a mental attack and has a huge effect even on Changnyo. In the current pirate world, apart from the time series devil fruit, this is the only other ability that can attack Changnyo. Changnyo himself did not expect that he would achieve such a huge harvest this time. So when he faced the fruit of the soul, his whole face showed an unprecedented seriousness. After all, no matter who this thing is given to, the prerequisite is that it must be a trustworthy person. Fortunately, the guy before didn't have very strong control over his psychic abilities, otherwise it might have been a different scene at this moment. If this thing is cultivated properly, it may not be a problem to dominate a sea area and even surpass the 4 emperors. After all, almost no one can stop such a thing. A mental attack is completely invisible. No matter how strong your vigilance is, you can't escape this bug-filled existence. After watching for a while, Chang-Nyo suddenly felt that his decision just now seemed a bit hasty. Why should these people be left behind? Chapter 45 Analyzing the Situation. He knows too much about this world. Isn't it necessary to pry some words from these guys? If something unexpected happens then, it won't be worth it. At this time, the three Omora people have been put on restraint collars. They can't show their strength at all now, so they can only sit there seriously. Chang-Nyo glanced at it, then stamped his right foot on the ground, and the original boundary space appeared again. His Majesty. Junhee was a little confused. Before he could figure out what was going on, Chang-Nyo slowly walked towards Omora. Ho ho! It seems that King Tru has changed his mind. Omora said with a smile. You're right, I changed my mind, because I suddenly discovered that I know most of the things you know, and there is no need to learn anything more from your mouths. But I can talk to you about these things, and it can be considered as some compensation before you die. Chang-Nyo knelt down and said calmly. Junhee consciously walked directly to the edge of the barrier and began to observe the surrounding situation. Although there would be no danger at all if he stayed here, no one could guarantee that nothing would happen. Tell me, what do you know? Omora no longer had his initial arrogant attitude. He was already waiting for death anyway. Instead of struggling, why not listen to what the other party wanted to say? Omora, from some aspects I have to admire your CP department. It is true that the CP department directly accepts the orders of the world government. Of course, rather than saying this, it is better to say directly that you only accept the orders of those 5 old men. Let me tell you, apart from the space series devil fruits that the 5 old stars ask you to look for, the rest should be surgical fruits. So during my time there must be other devil fruits for you to look for, right? Chang-Nyo asked with a smile. He had noticed the surprise on the other person's face. Omora didn't say anything now, but his expression said everything. He didn't know where the other party knew the information, but Chang-Nyo was not wrong. Your Majesty King Tru, it's really surprising that a small country in the South Blue Sea can actually learn about things in the New World. Omora said with a surprised smile. New World? I haven't heard of this term for a long time, and I don't know what the current situation has become. But I believe that the most powerful people on the sea now should be the Whitebeard pirates. The remaining members of the Rocks pirates should have become extremely powerful one by one. All of this now is probably enough to give your world government a headache. It's still unclear how the situation in this pirate world will develop in the future. If you can live well, you might actually be able to take a good look at the changes in this world. It seems like I won't survive, right? When Omora heard what Chang-Nyo said, the look of surprise on his face had diminished a lot. He no longer cared how the other party knew so many things about the new world. But from the other party's words, I have got an important message, that is, I may not be able to get out of here. But unlike others, Omora faced and accepted such things calmly, without any nervousness or uneasiness. Junhee, help give the adults in our CP department a ride. It will be more enjoyable. Chang-Nyo shouted directly to Junhee who was standing at the edge of the barrier. His eyes have been staring at Omora's expression, wanting to see what the other person's plans are now. Junhee received the order and showed no mercy at all. The 2 men were already seriously injured, but now the matter could be solved directly by just moving his fingers. Of the 6 people from the CP department, only Omora was left. The 2 looked at each other without any hatred in their eyes. Come on, coming out this time really made me feel surprised that Nanhai, which I thought was weak, could still have such a powerful existence like you. But if your existence is known to the world government, I can guess what happened. What state? Omora said with a smile. While he smiled, Chang-Nyo also laughed, and said in a calm tone, you are right, if our strength is known to the world government, then even I can't imagine what might happen. But Omora, in 2 years at most, what can we do even if the world government knows about our side? The situation on the sea will definitely be fixed within 2 years. Let alone the world government, who among the 9 major departments of your CP can come and stop us? Omoluo was suddenly stunned. The other party actually knew all the departments of CP, but he felt relieved when he thought about it. After all, even the 5 old stars knew about it, so what was there to be surprised about knowing how many departments CP had? Why are you so sure that the situation on the sea will change drastically within 2 years? Omura asked with no expression on his face, and his voice was low. The New World is just such a big place, and the pirates are restless. Everyone wants to be the new pirate king. They all want to know what the One Piece is. Therefore, in this state, the place where the island of Ravdru is located will definitely become a battleground for their big forces. None of the big pirates today are confident that they can find this thing directly, and no one can decipher the historical text. It is estimated that the most correct thing your world government has done is to kill everyone in O'Hara, otherwise what will happen next will be even more beyond your imagination. Among the pirates in the New World now, the Whitebeard pirates have occupied a place, and I am afraid that no matter what kind of pirates they are now, they can no longer compete with them. The other pirate groups probably don't have much effect. On the road to the king's hegemony, as I said just now, the remaining members of the Rocks pirate group will definitely have a place. As for the last seat, it's not yet clear who will win. It can be known. The only thing that is clear is that those at the Navy headquarters simply do not have the time and energy to deal with what is happening in the Sahai area, otherwise there would not be so many headaches for them. Thank you so much for letting me know. Omaluo really expressed his sincere thanks this time. He understood what Changniu said, but this time he connected everything together, which made him feel how scary the little guy in front of him was. Chapter 46: A Bite of the Devil Fruit. In fact, Junhee, who was standing next to Changniu, looked confused. He couldn't figure out what the two people were chatting about. He had never even heard of the word New World, let alone other things. Although he did not understand, Junhee was still writing down these words carefully. After all, following his own king, he could believe that Changniu would definitely take him into these places, and the South Blue Sea would definitely become the most powerful place in the future. Omura, tell me, do you have any wishes before your death? If possible, I wouldn't mind helping you realize it. Changniu asked with a smile. Omura just smiled softly and shook his head slightly. He never thought that he would have such an ending, so there was no unfulfilled wish at all. Since you don't have any wishes, I don't mind telling you one more thing before I die. There is an overlord on the 5 old stars that you worship. Changniu finished speaking with a smile, and then directly put his hand on the other person's head. In just an instant, Omura's entire body disappeared into thin air. All that fell to the ground was a restraining collar. This is Changniu's space attack ability, and it is also one of the more powerful ones currently, space decomposition. He can directly crush any object into a state of nothingness. In this world, it is impossible to find any information about him. But when Omura disappeared, Changniu felt a little empty in his heart. He didn't know why he felt like this. It might be difficult to meet an opponent who could match him. But he is not a pirate. If there are no ties behind him, Changniu may not mind leaving Omura's life, but it is different now. There are too many people standing behind him. Regardless of emotion or reason, Changniu, you can't gamble on this. One person's life can change the peace of mind of a country. Even if he is an acquaintance, he will not be polite or hold back at all. Those people from the CP department were still lying on the ground one by one, but they had long since lost their breath. They should be considered a group of very powerful beings in themselves. But their shortcoming is that they are too arrogant. Although they show the rigor in treating the enemy physically, the key is that they underestimate the enemy in their hearts and never face it. Otherwise, how could even Changniu today be able to fight against so many enemies? How can anyone win so easily? After all this was over, Changniu sighed, and then slowly stood up. His expression was completely different from before. The serious expression made Junhee, who was standing next to him, feel tremendous pressure. However, after Omura died, his devil fruit ability instantly attached to the fruit next to him. Shunwei, just take Omura's animal-type phantom beast devil fruit and eat it. I've told you about the devil fruit before, don't betray my trust. Changniu said seriously. It's not like Junhee doesn't know what the so-called animal-type devil fruit is like. Now His Majesty the King actually asked him to use it, which indeed showed his trust in him. Although Junhee was a little excited after hearing this, he still remained calm. He knelt down directly on his knees, looked firmly in his eyes, and said with a serious expression, Your Majesty, I will definitely live up to Your Majesty's trust. We have known each other for so many years, I still believe you on this, but you also know that after today's incident is revealed, everyone who knows about it will be informed. Our country should not be able to bear the consequences he has produced and brought. Changniu closed his eyes and took a deep breath and said, Yes, Your Majesty. Junhee said firmly. Go ahead and eat that devil fruit. This guy has completely failed to bring out the full potential of this devil fruit. Don't let me down. Chongnyo smiled slightly and said. Junhee walked to the fruit and picked up the devil fruit that seemed to be slightly emitting a purple light, with a look of nervousness and anxiety on his face. Then he closed his eyes and took a sharp bite, followed by the sound of vomiting. After a while, when his eyes were dull and he was about to take a second bite, Chongnyo next to him laughed and shouted, "Have you forgotten what I told you before? You only need one bite of the devil fruit." "Ah? Is that so?" Junhee looked at a loss. Now if he was asked to take a second bite, he probably didn't have much courage. In CP2, 6 people came, 5 devil fruit users, and 5 devil fruits appeared, which was pretty good. Take the psychic devil fruit away. The remaining devil fruits will be found by some more trustworthy people and let them eat them directly. Chongnyo said. He doesn't like these things at all. The most important thing is that these things cannot be leaked out. The CP department's investigative capabilities can be regarded as top-notch in the world. But it is consistent with what Chongnyo said. As long as there are 2 more years, the world government and navy will know that this matter was done by their own country, and then they will have nothing to do in the end. Yes, Your Majesty! Junhee shouted loudly. Now he felt that he was full of power, and he felt like he couldn't use it up. But it will take at least a few months for this guy to become familiar with devil fruits before he can slowly understand them. After all, almost all devil fruits can only be developed through actual combat. Let's make arrangements to set off in 3 days to the Holy Land of Marijoya, and notify all surrounding countries to solemnly inform us that our Kingdom of True will join the world government. We have built up the momentum this time, and it will be of great use in the future. Chongnyo casually removed the surrounding barrier space, and then calmly said to Junhee. Yes, Your Majesty. Chongnyo looked at the remaining corpses lying on the ground, and then blue light emitted from each person again. Exile. They were the same as the group of pirates they had solved before. The bodies of these people instantly appeared in the sea hundreds of miles away. It is estimated that if no one found it, they would have to wait for the end of being fishbone. Your Majesty, what should I do with that golden phone bug? Junhee asked. Oh. I would have forgotten about it if you didn't mention it. This thing is of no use to us, and it's troublesome to hold on to. But it's quite valuable. Just take it with you after 3 days. After I go to the Holy Land Marijoya, I can hand it over to other pirates and let them auction it off, and I can make some money. Chongnyo thought for a moment and said. Chapter 47 Join the World Government? After saying that, the 2 people started walking back directly, but on the way, Junhee still couldn't help asking, Your Majesty, what are the New World and One Piece? A new world. This is the second half of the Great Line, and it is also where the truly strong gather. Those who can survive here are almost all the strongest among the strong. As for the One Piece, this thing has always been called a great secret treasure, but until now, no one knows what is actually inside. The only one who knows about him is the team of Roger the Pirate King, Raftru. This place called the Ultimate Land is where he is stored. Chongnyo said as he walked. Big secret treasure? Doesn't that mean a lot of money? June and Halazi both cried out and said excitedly. What are you thinking about? No one knows the final appearance of One Piece. If it is really a lot of gold and silver treasures, do you think that after the death of the Pirate King, his crew members lived in such a mess? Chongnyo said with a speechless expression. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, I have almost no understanding of these things. Junhee said awkwardly. We will set off in 3 days. Then I will take you to see what the Grand Route looks like. Chongnyo said with a smile. Last time, I wanted to go directly to the Grand Route for a tour, but in the end I didn't expect that the Royal Kingdom's attack would occur, which delayed the matter. This time going to the Holy Land Marijoa happened to be a better opportunity. No matter how you go, you have to pass through the Grand Line before you can go there. The current Toru Kingdom is not afraid to join the world government at all. Before, the country was so poor that it could not afford the heavenly gold. But it is different now. The family has enough food, so they can still worry about such things. But if he wants to join the world government, the king of this country must go to Victory Marijoya to pay homage to those celestial dragons. This is the only choice. Chongnyo has already figured out these situations. Although they don't want to do this, they can't fault it now. Junhee accompanied Chongnyo down the long steps. The key is that the platform above is still in a mess, and the shocking scars caused by the battle are still left in the open space. The CP department was completely wiped out this time. To outsiders, there was no movement. The True Kingdom still maintained its original appearance. The next thing they need to deal with is to go to the Holy Land Marijoya to negotiate. Everything in True Kingdom is currently developing steadily, but there is still a long way to go before we reach the ideal goal. But despite this, the current development of the entire True Kingdom is enough to make other surrounding countries jealous. Since the defeat of the Roha Kingdom, no surrounding country dares to challenge the authority of the True Kingdom. However, after residents of other countries around the country learned about the national treatment of the Kingdom of True, many people near the border have begun to move closer to this country. They racked their brains and even squeezed their heads to join this country and abandon their original national life. Regarding this situation, Chang Nyo did not refuse, but welcomed the arrival of these people. For a country, the economy cannot explain everything. Population growth means that the economy can grow rapidly. What they do now is almost all external life, and the country's internal management is almost seamless. Not even we need the National Guard so that the country can be safe and sound. The largest country in the South Blue Sea is not just determined by geography. After learning that the Kingdom of Toru was going to join the world government, many people at the bottom still didn't understand. After all, for them, joining the world government meant paying high fees, but they never thought about these fees. There is no need for these people to come out at all. Forced to have no choice, the day after announcing its intention to join the world government, the entire True Kingdom began to issue notices about the benefits of joining the world government, and that the costs provided to the world government did not need to be borne by anyone. After receiving such notice, the nervousness of those people was relieved. After all, many people had experienced such a thing. A country close to the Kingdom of Toru, the Kingdom of Salbi, is a member of the world government. Its land area is directly adjacent to the Kingdom of Toru. Now many people from the Kingdom of Toru have come from there. The way the Sorbet Kingdom handed over the heavenly gold was almost unlimited extortion and exploitation of their own people, which caused resentment among the people in the country. However, as a member of the world government, those high-ranking nobles are the masters of the entire country. The reason why some people are worried is because the Toru Kingdom, which feels relatively good, suddenly announced that it will join the world government, so they may still face the same problems as before. But after the announcement was sent out, these people began to slowly choose to believe in this country. After the third day, Chang Nyo appeared here again at Nannuwa port. Different from what appeared before, this time Chang Nyo completely set out as a king and headed for the Holy Land Marijoa along the Great Channel. This time they did not choose the cumbersome national, but instead chose a smaller and lighter ship. The length of this ship is about 50 meters, which is already a lot smaller than the national, but it may be much better in other aspects. Standing at the port, Chang Nyo turned to look at Gagoya and asked, "Are everything ready?" "Your Majesty, everything here has been prepared." Among them, 50 bottles of rose perfume you arranged, 2,000 sets of exquisite clothing, a golden scepter representing identity, and some other supporting items have all been prepared. You place it on board. Gagoya picked up a small notebook in his hand and began to report. "Your Majesty, I also want to go with you this time. How about letting me go outside to see the new world together?" Luosta stood here, looking at Chang Nyo expectantly and said. Chang Nyo smiled, then patted Luosta on the shoulder, and said earnestly, "There will be many opportunities for you to go out in the future, but this time, the country has not yet stabilized. After the economy improves, you can go whenever you want." "That's right, Luosta, this time we go out with His Majesty for fun. If there is a chance next time, I will talk to your Majesty and take you out personally," Junhee said with a smile. "I see." Luosta said with a disappointed look on his face. "Now that everyone is in place, let's set off quickly. I really want to see what the Holy Land of Marijoy looks like now," Chang Nyo said. This is the second time Chang Nyo has left the country, and this time he has a clear goal unlike before. All that remains is to move towards the destination. Chapter 48 Filibuster. In fact, for them, if it was better, they wouldn't need to start from upside down mountain at all. After all, it would be equivalent to a long detour. However, their technology is not developed yet. Sea Tower Stone is a crucial thing for sailing on the sea in this world. After all, with this thing, you can directly cross the windless zone. But they don't have it now, so they can only start from the starting point step by step. If they can cross the windless zone, then they can directly enter the Grand Line without having to worry too much at all. This time the navigator on the ship is still Barlow. Since this guy changed his identity as a pirate and became their navigator, he no longer has the dream of being a pirate. After all, he can only stay here. Enjoy a relatively quiet and high-quality life. The sea surface was almost the same as what we had encountered before we set out. The sea surface was quite calm and there were no obstacles in it. When they appeared in Upside Down Mountain again, they still couldn't help being shocked when they saw the scene of water flowing backwards in front of them. After all, this was indeed a landscape that subverted the three views. Notify Barlow to slow down the ship when we get down to the Grand Line later. There may be something unexpected ahead of us. Chang Nyo ordered to Junhee next to him. Okay. Standing in place, Chang Nyo wondered if he would encounter that huge whale. After all, that guy had been here 50 years ago since the official plot began, so he must still be in this place now. Although no one else understood it, everyone's eyes widened when the ship began to sail rapidly towards the Grand Route. Because in front of them, there was a fish bigger than their entire boat. Although it only poked out its head, from a distance, it really looked like a mountain. Your Majesty, be careful. Junhee instantly jumped to the bow of the ship and started to prepare for an attack. Chang Nyo was speechless. After finally meeting the first guy who officially appeared in the plot, Junhee actually behaved like this. Come down, it's okay, don't whine. Chang Nyo shouted directly to Junhee. Junhee was stunned for a moment, and then he thought of what Chang Nyo told him to inform Barlow when they were going up the mountain, and he seemed to understand something instantly. He hurriedly ran to Chang Nyo and asked with some confusion, Your Majesty, did you already know that there would be such a big guy here? Let's talk about it when we get here. I'm also looking forward to how big this thing is. A smile appeared on Chang Nyo's lips. Because he had been prepared in advance, Barlow had already started the deceleration mode when the boat started to descend, so the boat started to stop slowly when it was still 50 or 60 meters away from the huge whale. Came down. Everyone on the boat now ran to the edge of the boat and looked at this huge guy in surprise. The opponent just opened his eyes and his eyes were already as big as half their ship. Wow, this guy is really big. Gagoya couldn't help but sigh when he got close to this huge whale. Everyone else's eyes also showed shock. For many of the people here, they have almost never been out of their own sea areas. Except for the original group of Barlow and others, they may have wandered many places. None of the king's guards brought out by Chang Nyo followed them. It's like seeing the world. Even King Chang Nyo couldn't help but get excited when he saw this huge creature. When he watched this anime before, he had no idea about this whale at all, but now when he saw the real big guy, it made him feel how small he was. Your Majesty, this thing is really big. Junhee stared at the guy in front of him intently. This must be big. This thing is the largest island whale in the entire sea. Although it is not the largest creature in the world, it can still be regarded as one of the best. Chang Nyo said. Woo! While they were still admiring it, the island whale made a sound. For such a big guy, the vibration of the sound caused waves in the entire sea. The abri, which was so close to them, felt like it was about to disintegrate. Your name is Rab, right? Chang Nyo stood on the bow of the boat and shouted directly to the huge whale. When Chang Nyo finished speaking, the huge whale, which had some dull eyes, slowly looked towards them. The other people on the boat were instantly shocked when they felt this scene, and many of them were so frightened that they were at a loss what to do. If this thing opened its mouth, it could swallow their ship directly into its belly. When Lebu looked at Chang Nyo, his head moved slightly, but it directly caused waves in the sea water, causing the small boat to almost hit the mountain. If Barlow hadn't reacted quickly, they would have all fallen into the sea by now. Your Majesty, do you know this guy? Gagoya looked at Chang Nyo in surprise and asked. It's not like we know him, I just heard about him before. Chang Nyo said with a smile. After saying this, Rab seemed a little excited, but among the pirates from all over the world who entered the Grand Line, who wouldn't recognize it? After all, this place is a place that must be passed through. It is estimated that no one in the world will be impressed by this big guy. As he spoke, Rab completely stretched his huge head out of the water. This whale as big as an island really gave people a sense of oppression. At this moment, everyone on the boat focused their attention on His Majesty the King. After all, he was the cause of this thing. If anyone is not careful, they may all be buried in the belly of the fish. Chang Nyo looked at Rab blinking. Although he didn't understand what he was talking about, he could at least understand it somewhat. You don't have to doubt it. I've heard your name elsewhere, but I'm just very curious about you. Do you want to go to sea with me? I can also look for the person you want to find. Chongnyo stood on the bow and shouted loudly. Although Rab is a whale, he can understand what humans say. Currently, Chongnyo does not have the ability to hear the sounds of all things. This requires a certain level of domineering power. But Chongnyo believes that he will be able to reach this level in a short time, and it shouldn't be a big problem if he can barely communicate with a whale. Chapter 49 Eternal Record Pointer. After Lebyu heard what Chongnyo said, there was some hesitation in his eyes. Then he shook his head directly, causing a huge wave in an instant. Your Majesty, please don't talk to him anymore, please. If we continue talking, everyone on this ship will be chilled. Gagoya was so frightened that he sat on the deck with tears in his eyes. It was obvious that he was dominated by fear. Others were also a little frightened, and even Junhee was a little at a loss when faced with such a thing. Chongnyo was the only one who laughed out loud. Let's start, the mission is still important, this whale, come back and talk when we have a chance. Chongnyo smiled and ordered the people next to him. Now how can these people have the intention to stay here? One or two of them are seizing the time to leave this place. Facing such a huge guy, even if they sneeze next, they will probably be able to make their small boat instantly sink in time. Barlow already wished he could use his hands and feet together. He even wished he could have 2 wings on the ship and fly away from this place quickly. After all, it felt too dangerous to him. Just a few words of conversation had already made them feel in danger of life and death. If they continued to chat, this whale could kill them all if they were not careful. Goodbye, I'll talk to you again when I have the chance. Of course, if you are willing, you can go to the True Kingdom in the West Sea to find me. The ship had already started sailing, but Chongnyo still shouted to Lebyu without giving up. Not long after they left, an old man who looked to be in his 50s stood out before he could reach his head. His eyes were cloudy. He waited until the ship disappeared from sight, and then slowly began to disappear. In Rab's huge head. Their voyage this time is not an adventurous voyage. At best, it is just to complete a mission. It does not have the same experiences as the protagonist when they set foot on the Grand Route. Besides, on the sea at this time, especially in the first half of the Grand Line, there were not as many pirates as expected. But if you can meet 1 or 2 along the way, you are very lucky. After all, the sea is so big, and the chance of encountering a small pirate ship is indeed not very high. Gagoya, where does the record pointer we got now lead to? Chongnyo asked curiously. Sorry, Your Majesty, the record pointer we got can only go to Alabasta. This is the only eternal record pointer we can buy on this great route. Gagoya said. This time, Gagoya followed him out, dressed in a completely different style than before. It is completely made according to the kind of royal sister style that Chongnyo likes. A white shirt and hip skirt, plus black stockings and high heels, a long ponytail, and a black glasses frame show that the other party is already interested in this voyage. Full of expectations. After all, a capable king like Chongnyo is unthinkable in many places. However, Chongnyo noticed a key word, that is, the eternal record pointer actually leads to the country of Alabasta. Chongnyo was quite impressed by this place. In addition, Chongnyo seemed to have thought of something suddenly. Junhee, after arriving in Alabasta, we will stop there for a week. During this period, I need to give you a task. It must be completed by then. Chongnyo's face suddenly turned serious, even surprising others around him. Gagoya didn't expect that just by mentioning the name of the country Alabasta, he could make His Majesty the King show such an expression. Junhee put away the smile on his face, looked serious, and said firmly, Please give me Your Majesty's orders. In the land of Alabasta Palace, there is one thing that is very important to us, and that is the things stored on Batlila Island. This place has a historical record. I need you to destroy the content on it. Do you have confidence? Anyway, the people standing on the deck of the ship are all his close confidants, and there is no need to hide them. Although Gagoya was very curious as to what exactly Bartala kept, looking at the expressions on the two of them, it was not difficult to guess that this thing must be very important. Of course she couldn't guess it, but the seriousness on Junhee's face was already evident. Your Majesty, don't worry, your subordinates will definitely do it. Junhee said seriously. Don't be too anxious. After all, that thing is stored in the palace. Besides, this order is not dead. Just do your best. Chongnyo suddenly felt relaxed and said to Junhee with a smile. Your Majesty, you once said that thing is related to the life and death of our country. Even if I die, I will definitely do it. Junhe said. Then let me wait and see. Chang Nyo said with a smile. During the subsequent voyage, the group encountered almost no obstacles. After all, their route was directly to Alabasta. Although they encountered several islands in the middle, these things had almost no effect on them. There is no shortage of supplies on the ship now, so you just need to go directly. However, as the Toru Kingdom is a country that frequently makes headlines in newspapers, there are almost no secrets left when Chang Nyo and his team set out. Before arriving in Alabasta, the country had already begun to make full preparations. In the palace of Alabasta. Minister Zhou, where are they expected to be now? Cobra asked, looking at a man about his own age but with a fat head and big ears. Your Majesty, the king of the Kingdom of True estimates that it will take another 2 days to reach our Alabasta, but we are not sure whether they will stop in our Alabasta, said the fat left minister. Don't worry. They will definitely stop at this place. After all, they need to go to the Holy Land of Marie Joya. The eternal record pointer leading here is only owned by us in Alabasta. Cobra said with a smile on his face. But Your Majesty, how could their small country in the South Blue Sea know about the eternal record pointer? Minister Zhou said again. You are wrong. If they don't know, do you think this country can carry out such a large maritime trade, even including the navy, and still be able to silence the other party? Cobra didn't believe that the other party didn't have any wisdom. Judging from past newspapers, the Kingdom of True was definitely not as simple as imagined. Chapter 50 Sea Cat. In the royal palace of Alabasta, preparations have been made to welcome the young King True. After all, according to the country's situation, the current True Kingdom can be said to be a country that they all miss. Good economic development and solving the problem of people's lack of food. After searching the scriptures, this is the real purpose of Cobra. After all, he was right about one thing. The eternal record pointer leading to the Holy Land of Marie Joya was found only in Alabasta on the entire Grand Line. It can even be said that only their palace has such a thing. That's why Cobra dared to say such words, the other party would definitely come here. However, there is no need for him to say more about these things. Chang Nyo will definitely arrive here. After all, when it comes to Pluto's weapon, that thing is lying quietly in his own country, and the only place where this thing is recorded is in the Alabasta Palace. Although there is only one person left in the world who can understand these historical texts, Chang Nyo cannot guarantee that things will proceed according to the original plan. His appearance is likely to change the course of the pirates, so naturally the hidden dangers of this thing need to be eliminated in advance. If he hadn't gone to Marijo this time, he wouldn't have been able to remember such a thing. That's why he made such a decision to let Junhe go and solve this hidden danger that may arise in the future. Although no one knows what the True Kingdom will develop into in a few years, they must at least nip everything that could threaten them in the cradle. Chang Nyo didn't have any so-called whims. He just wanted to maintain the stability of his country. When he learned that Pluto weapons actually appeared in his country, Chang Nyo himself was shocked. But since things are already like this, although there is no chance to change, at least you must do what you can do in advance. 2 days after the first voyage, the huge desert country of Alabasta appeared in front of everyone's eyes. It is different from the island countries we saw before. This is a truly huge country. It's just that when you stay here, you can see at a glance that it is almost in a desert state, and the light yellow sand has extended to the seaside. And there are not many green trees on it. This is the Great Sea Route. Even if the two countries are not far apart along the way, their climate and environment have changed dramatically. Your Majesty, this grand route is really uncomfortable. It was extremely cold there yesterday. It's only been a while now, but it's really too hot here. Gago Yao appeared wearing a sun hat, and the buttons of his shirt had begun to reveal his underwear. Not to mention her, everyone else had the same idea. Where are we now? The reason why the Grand Line is famous is because it is the area where everyone dreams of sailing. It is also full of uncertainties that so many people have appeared to challenge themselves. Chang Nyo said leisurely on the recliner. There was a sun umbrella on the deck. Chang Nyo was wearing only beach shorts, shirtless, and huge sunglasses. He was lying in the shade, drinking an iced drink and talking leisurely. There are not many things you can do while sailing on the boat, other than leisurely drinking tea and looking at the sea. Your Majesty, ever since we entered the Grand Line, I have noticed that a bird has been following us above us. I don't know if it is my hallucination or something, but I always feel that he has never flown above our heads. Junhee was also leaning on the deck, talking lazily. You read that right, that bird has indeed been following us, not from the beginning of the Grand Line, and it has been following us since we set off. Chang Nyo turned sideways, opened one eye slightly, and said to Junhee who was lying in the shade. As soon as these words came out, Junhee immediately jumped up, looking closely at the bird in the sky that had been observing people like him, and his alert look immediately appeared. Don't be nervous. We didn't do anything else anyway, so just follow along. There are countless countries in the world looking at us now, so don't worry about them. The corners of Chang Nyo's mouth raised slightly, he picked up the drink in his hand and took another sip, and then said leisurely. Do we really not care? Gago Ya also asked. It doesn't matter, just watch it. Chang Nyo seemed to pay no attention to this matter. For them, it was not easy to catch the seagull above their heads. They could catch it directly with just a little effort. But this is completely unnecessary. After all, they are sailing on the sea. Even if this seagull disappears, it is estimated that before long, something hidden in other places may appear to observe people like them. It's just the newspaper's methods. You can tell what these things are for with your eyes closed. Hearing what Chang Nyo had said, the other two people didn't pay too much attention to it. It was just like His Majesty the King said, just watch it, it won't affect it anyway. Your Majesty, what a big cat. Not long after they started chatting, other people started shouting. Chang Nyo couldn't help but sat up curiously, took off his huge sunglasses, and saw that there was indeed a big lucky cat on the side of their sailing path. The pure white body and the slightly raised hand seemed to be greeting them. This thing seems to be at least 50 meters tall. The height on the sea is already 20 or 30 meters, not to mention that part of it is still on the bottom of the sea. To ordinary people, this scene may seem a bit scary, but to these people on the ship, they are more just curious, and really have no other thoughts at all. No fear, no surprise. Everyone just feels that it is strange that such a creature can actually appear in the sea. For most people who have never been to the sea, this is indeed something worth appreciating. This scene indeed attracted everyone's attention, but having experienced something as big as a rabbi before, this thing seemed a little too small. So cute. Gago Ya said with a smile on his face while he was working on the boat. What did I think it was? It turned out to be Alabasta's specialty sea cat. Continue sailing. Chang Nyo said. After saying that, Chang Nyo continued to lie there without paying any attention to Hai Mao's appearance. Chapter 51 Entering Alabasta. At least one thing is certain, now we have indeed entered the situation of Alabasta. This thing is a specialty of Alabasta. Chang Nyo didn't expect to see this guy this time, but it was normal when he thought about it. Your Majesty, should we disembark at the rapeseed flower city in Alabasta? Or directly disembark at Albina, their royal capital? Gago Ya asked. Rape flower. Chang Nyo thought for a moment and then said directly, let's just stop here. It's just a good time to see the customs of Alabasta and get a good understanding of the situation in this country. Okay, Your Majesty, I will make arrangements right away. Gago Ya said. In Chang Nyo's impression, rapeseed flowers seem to be a place rich in perfume, but according to the current state of Alabasta, let alone perfume, they probably can't even grow flowers. But at the same time, he also thought of an idea. As of now, his country's business cannot be carried out on the grand route. After all, the cost is too high. If there is an intermediate base country for sales, then such costs can be greatly reduced. After thinking for a while, he stopped thinking about it. After all, it was too hot here. He already wanted to jump directly into the sea water to take a good shower. But for him who has eaten the devil fruit, the sea water is not suitable for him. They are almost always deadly. The weather in Alabasta is not ordinary, and there is a strong dryness in the heat. Even if I stay in a cool place, my lips will still become dry after a while. The ship travels very slowly in such a place. After all, it relies on wind power to propel it throughout the entire journey. However, in Alabasta, wind is almost a luxury item. As night approached, the group of them finally arrived at the location of the rapeseed flowers. It was almost as expected, but of course it had a huge port. There are many ships docked here, and if you look carefully, there are also a few pirate ships among them. But now they still have the energy to take care of this. After finally starting to dock, they all started to run down impatiently. Having lived on the ship for so long, although the supplies prepared are still sufficient, on the other hand, Eating only a few kinds of food every day will always make people feel bored after a long time. This is the rapeseed field. Chang Nyo looked at the buildings in front of him that looked like slums. There really was no aesthetics at all. Even compared to his own true kingdom, this place was simply inferior to the extreme. Not to mention that the wind and sand are particularly strong at night. There are only 2 bustling trees leaning on the coastline. At a glance, there is nothing but sand. Your Majesty, this should be the rapeseed field. It seems we can only spend tonight here. We will start heading to Albina tomorrow. Gago Yao arranged and said. We can only do this for now. I still feel more at ease on land. I want to find a place to rest today. We will talk about tomorrow's affairs tomorrow. Chang Nyo just wants to find a place to have a good rest and taste the delicacies of Alabasta. After all, I have already learned about the specialties here before, such as scorpions, centipedes, and the like, especially scorpions. They are the same size as lobsters. I guess they taste pretty good. Your Majesty, since we have arrived, should we inform Alabastus garrison here first to avoid any misunderstandings? Junhee reminded. You are right to remind them about this, then go and tell them. Chang Nyo said. Let's walk forward first, find a place to stay, and have something to eat along the way. Gago Ya said. Chang Nyo looked at this dilapidated rape flower city. They were almost all built at different heights. At a glance, it seemed that the road in front of him was straight upward. Just using the color of knowledge to perceive the landscape of the entire city, almost everything was imprinted in Chang Nyo's mind. The wide road beneath your feet is filled with sand. The wind and sand have swept to the edge of the city. For this place, it is estimated that it may not be long before it becomes uninhabitable. But the people here don't seem to realize this at all, but even if they have realized it, what effect will it have? It's hard to imagine what Alabasta was like before. For such a huge country, and for a country with a history of thousands of years, its initial appearance was definitely not what it is now. It's only night now and the sky is not yet dark, and there is a lot of light overall, but the stars in the sky have begun to loom. The city doesn't look like any streets, and there aren't many people walking on the roads. When a group of people from Changnyo appeared here, the aboriginal people stared at them with curiosity. Perhaps it was because they were used to seeing pirates, so they were not interested in the sudden appearance of Changnyo and others dressed in formal clothes. There was such a curious demeanor. As the king of true country, Changnyo's appearance in Alabasta this time is equivalent to his mission to this country. The crown and king's clothes on his body naturally need to be worn, because what he always represents is belonging to the country. The image of his own Toru kingdom. As for the other king's guards, they walked in neat steps, and Gagoya had already started to put on a coat. It's getting closer and closer to night, and the temperature difference between day and night in this place is quite large. It was already extremely hot during the day, but now the breeze is blowing, and there are already waves of chills. It is because of such formal attire that many people stop and watch. But what was beyond their imagination was that not long after they got off the boat and walked, there was already a group of soldiers waiting in front. They held long guns in their hands and stood there neatly and divided into 2 small groups, maintaining a welcoming posture. Before these people arrived, the leader of the team had already ran quickly towards the front. When he saw the clothes Changnyo was wearing, the middle-aged man immediately respectfully shouted, "King of Alabasta! Guard Captain Lan Mo welcomes His Majesty the King of True Kingdom." Junhee was instantly on guard. He had not notified the Alabasta country of his and his others' arrival in advance, but now that people had begun to welcome them, people with a discerning eye had already noticed that something was wrong. Changnyo was quite indifferent and said with a slight smile, "His Majesty Lao Cobra really welcomes you. Not notifying us in advance seems rude on our part. King True is very polite. Our Majesty has said that he hopes that after King True has a good rest, he can go to our Albina capital palace. Your Majesty will definitely host a banquet in his honor." Lan Mo said with a smile. "I wonder how Captain Lan Mo knew the whereabouts of His Majesty the King?" Junhee asked with a serious face. Chapter 52 Princess Alabasta. Junhee followed this time, but as the captain of the King's Guard, although His Majesty the King is powerful, the key is that as a subordinate, he still needs to eliminate all dangers for his king. Junhee, the King of Alabasta is so welcoming. You don't have to be like this. It's our mistake to come without warning. Captain Lan Mo's welcome is already an unexpected surprise. You don't need to know so much about other things. Changnyo looked at Junhee and said with a smile on his face. For such a big country, it is quite normal to have such small means. His Majesty King Tru is generous, but I, Alabasta, should still respond to this matter. Captain Lan Mo said and took out a newspaper directly from his pocket. Although it is not on the home page, there is a specific route for their voyage. The newspaper this time is not a particularly big newspaper, but just some guys who exist to attract attention. The seagull that had been following them overhead was still flying near them. This feeling of being watched suddenly made Chang Nyo not feel particularly good. Captain Lan Mo, Our Majesty is already tired. I wonder if we can find a place to rest first and wait until tomorrow to discuss other matters. Gagoya walked to the front and said to Lan Mo with a smile. What I'm saying is, His Majesty King Tru is here to invite you. Your place of stay has been arranged for you. If there is any lack of hospitality, please forgive me. After listening to what Lan Mo said, Chang Nyo just responded with a smile. It is impossible for everyone on this ship to go over. Except for the National Guard personnel participating this time, Barlow and others must stay on the ship. Others come down to replenish supplies or take a rest. It is time to rest at night. At this time, the ship still needs to be guarded. Although this rape flower city looks dilapidated, in such a city, people can still see an incredible scene. Under the leadership of Lan Mo, Chang Nyo and his party came to a place that looked like a manor. The modern architectural style is completely different from those seen before. This place is completely on the backside of the mountain, not affected by wind and sand at all, and the entire manor is covered with green trees and flowers, making it look like two different worlds exist. His Majesty King Tru, this is the vacation palace of His Majesty the King. By the order of His Majesty the King, we are specially hosting you to stay here today. Lan Mo said respectfully. Now the servants in the entire manor have arrived at the door and stood in 2 rows, and everyone is extremely respectful. I will go to Albina tomorrow. It seems I must thank King Cobra. Chang Nyo said with a smile. Your Majesty, King Tru, you are welcome. Lan Mo continued to walk in front and received them respectfully, fully reflecting what a big country should be like. But before they entered, they saw a 7 or 8-year-old girl running inside instantly. Junhee was about to make a move, but was stopped by Chang Nyo. As for Lan Mo, this guy didn't notice anything different at all. After Chang Nyo entered the palace, Lan Mo stayed outside and said respectfully to Chang Nyo, Your Majesty, King Tru, if you have any further instructions, you can directly call the servants. I will do the same. Working as your escort outside. Thank you, Captain. Junhee smiled and thanked him directly. As for Chang Nyo, he just looked back and didn't say anything. As a king, his own style must be maintained. The entire palace is a 2-story structure. The upper floor is the living area. As for the lower floor, it is a very large hall with a height of at least 10 meters. A huge chandelier hangs directly above the dome. After Lan Mo and the others exited, the entire palace was guarded by members of the King's Guards of the Kingdom of Tru. In the hall, servants began to come over with meals one after another. Your Majesty, after working so hard for so long, it's better to eat something quickly. Gagoya said to Chang Nyo who was sitting on the sofa. Okay, little girl staying over there, do you want to come over and have something to eat? Chang Nyo suddenly didn't know who he was talking to, and Gagoya was a little surprised. Come out, His Majesty the King has already spoken. Junhee looked seriously behind a pillar not far from them and shouted in a low voice. What happened? Gagoya still didn't understand what happened. But at this moment, a little head with blue hair began to slowly poke out from behind the originally calm pillar. Junhee rushed forward instantly, and just as he was about to take action, Chang Nyo immediately said, Stop Junhee. After hearing the order, Junhee immediately retracted his stretched out hand. Come here. You know how to run around at a young age, so you are not worried about your father. Chang Nyo said with a smile as he looked at the head sticking out. You know me? The little girl asked curiously. Your Majesty, do you know her? Gagoya asked almost at the same time as the other party. You too, we will face many people and things in the future. When doing things, we must look at all the details thoroughly. No matter in terms of clothing or appearance, he can appear here naturally. Who do you think he will be? After Chang Nyo's words, the two of them were stunned. Junhee looked at the little girl carefully. Regardless of the clothes he was wearing or his exquisite appearance, it was clear from every aspect that the girl was not an ordinary child. Come on, Princess Weiwei, you must be hungry too, right? Chang Nyo shouted again in a soft voice. The others were immediately confused and didn't understand what happened. Why would their own king's refrigerator say such a thing? Why Wei? Princess. Gago Ya felt that he had seen it wrong. This place was at least 100 miles away from Albina. It really surprised them that the Princess of Alabasta would appear here. How do you know me? Wai Wei nervously walked to the opposite side of Chang Nyo and asked curiously again. It's very simple. Judging from your appearance, you should be very familiar with this place. Coupled with your clothes and the color of your hair, it is not difficult to determine your identity. Chang Nyo said with a smile. Amazing. Wai Wei said with admiration. Everyone, sit down, eat quickly, and then have a good rest. Chang Nyo looked at several people and said. Chapter 53 Talking about marriage? Wai Wei was not polite and sat directly opposite Chang Nyo. Looking at the dishes on the table in front of her, her stomach had already begun to growl unsatisfactorily. How did you get here? Chang Nyo asked, taking a bite of food. I followed Lan Mo. I heard from my father that King Tru was coming, and he often mentioned your name, so I was very curious and wanted to come and see what you look like. Then he secretly followed Lan Mo. Wai Wei said while eating. She looks like she hasn't eaten in a long time, which is both cute and helpless. Gago Ya and Junhee looked at each other with surprise in their eyes. It was really admirable that a little girl could do such a thing. Just after they had eaten for a while, a quarrel suddenly broke out outside. Under the leadership of the guards, Lan Mo appeared in the hall anxiously. The moment he saw Wai Wei, Lan Malahwei was delighted and breathed a sigh of relief. Princess Wai Wei, how can you walk out of the palace? His Majesty the King is already worried to death. Lan Mo said respectfully and helplessly to the child Wai Wei. I'm sorry, Uncle Lan Mo. I was just too curious so I came here. I have nothing to do now. Wai Wei said with a smile while eating a lot of food in her mouth. Sorry, Your Majesty King Tru, the appearance of our princess may have disturbed you, I will take her away right now. Lan Mo said quickly. No, just stay here tonight. Let's go to Albina tomorrow morning. Chang Nyo didn't mind, just said with a smile. Hey? Is that okay? Lan Mo asked in disbelief. If you are worried, you can stay outside today. Junhee stood up and said. Sit down and have something to eat together. Chang Nyo asked. No, Your Majesty, we have our own things to do. Since Princess Wai Wei is here, I may be disturbing you a lot. I hope you can forgive me. Lan Mo said respectfully. You're welcome, Princess Wai Wei is quite cute. She can have some fun if she stays here. Chang Nyo said. Uncle Lan Mo, just tell your father that I will go back tomorrow, so he doesn't have to worry. Wai Wei said with a smile. Lan Mo also had a look of helplessness on his face. He could only walk out and pick up the phone and start reporting. Everyone in the Alabasta Palace was anxious now. Cobra stood at the door of the palace with an equally anxious look on his face. But at this time, a middle-aged man hurriedly ran over, holding the phone and shouting, Your Majesty, we found it. After Cobra heard this, he hurriedly took 2 steps forward, supported the other party and asked, Where is Wai Wei? Your Majesty, Princess Wai Wei followed Lan Mo and secretly ran to the rapeseed field. She is now in the palace over the rapeseed flower, with King Tru. The middle-aged man said. This girl. Cobra looked angry on the surface, but he suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. At least now I know where the person is, so I don't have to worry too much. Your Majesty, Lan Mo has said that King Tru will take Princess Wai Wei to the royal capital tomorrow morning. He also led a team of people to guard the outside of the palace, so you don't have to worry. The middle-aged man said again. Hey, that's it, let Lan Mo keep an eye on Wai Wei, and don't let her run around anymore. Cobra took a deep breath and said. The anger in his tone has now disappeared, and he is satisfied as long as he knows that his daughter is fine now. At this moment, in the palace in the rapeseed field. After everyone ate, they all sat quietly on the sofa. They didn't have any good entertainment tools, so they could only watch with big eyes and small eyes. You don't look very old, do you? Wai Wei suddenly said this to Chang Nyo, so that Chang Nyo didn't know how to answer. Our king is only 17 years old this year. Not only is he very good in appearance, but also in abilities and other aspects. Maybe after a few more years, you can tell your father to marry our king. Gago Ya sat aside with a smile on his face and said jokingly. I think this proposal is quite good, but I'm a little young. Junhee also stayed aside and mixed in. Can you two stop being such beasts? She is still a child, so don't say such things in front of her. Changnyo looked at the two of them speechlessly and said. However, a scene that surprised them came. Wai Wei stood up and walked to Changnyo to take a look. Then she pursed her lips and said, "You look pretty good. I have heard my father talk about you many times. I have the ability, maybe after a few years, their suggestions won't be impossible." Ahem. Hearing this, Changnyo couldn't hold back and choked on his own saliva. What he said to this little girl was so shocking. Although Wai Wei in front of her looks very cute, as a man who is about to become an adult, he really has no interest in such a young girl. Haha. Your Majesty, I think you can really wait a few more years. After all, Princess Wai Wei will inherit such a large country in the future. Junhee couldn't help but smile. Get the latest chapters on n/felban.com. Even Gago Ya, who was sitting there, started covering his mouth and started laughing. Everyone was laughing, except Changnyo, who was sitting there feeling at a loss. Thinking about what Wai Wei will look like in the future, it would really be good to marry her as his wife. After all, Alabasta is also a big country, but at least Changnyo has no such thoughts now. Gago Ya, hurry up and see if the bedroom is ready. Let's go to bed early. Don't think about these things every day. Changnyo stood up and said. He didn't want to discuss this matter with these people anymore. What happened to your Majesty the King? Princess Wai Wei looked at Changnyo, who had already stood up and left, and curiously asked the two people next to her. She acted heartless, but the first impression she left on others was already like this, and she really didn't know how to change her image next. Your Highness, perhaps our king is shy. If you want to marry our king in the future, the first thing you need to do is wait a few years until you grow up. Junhee said with a smile. That's right, Princess Wai Wei. Our king is a handsome young man who is rare to see. In the future, I really don't know if anyone in this world can surpass his masterpiece. And with the help of His Majesty the King, Alabasta, we will definitely be able to get rid of the current state of poverty, Gago Ya said. Chapter 54 Difficult Child. Their trust in His Majesty the King has reached an infinite level. The Kingdom of True has changed the current state of the country in just over 2 years from such a barren state before, so it would be great for Alabasta to have such a good. If this country really had the support of His Majesty the King, it would definitely not be like this in the future. Although most of what the two said were joking, and they were joking to a child, as the Princess of Alabasta, she took everything into her heart. The situation in the country of Alabasta was not because she didn't understand anything at a young age. On the contrary, he had always seen his father's hard work in running the country. Is what you said true? Wai Wei stood there, no longer playful as before, but asked Gago Ya seriously. The two people who had already stood up and started preparing to go to bed sat down again with curious faces after seeing Wai Wei's appearance. In this spacious hall, two adults were talking about such a thing around a child. If others saw it, they would think they were going to kidnap it. Gago Ya smiled, and it was obvious that although the other person was a child, the expression on his face could not be faked. Little Princess Wai Wei, which aspect are you referring to? Gago Ya asked with a smile. Is it possible to get Alabasta out of poverty? Now the whole country is no longer what it used to be. Many people have begun to have insufficient food to eat. I see that my father's hair has turned white because of this matter. He is young, so I also want to do something for him that I can do. Wai Wei said these words sincerely with tears in her eyes. What I just said is indeed true. Since your father can often mention our king, it means that he still agrees with and approves of our king's decision-making and abilities. Maybe you don't know that when we were in the Kingdom of True 2 years ago, it was not even as good as your Alabasta now. But now if you look at our entire country, it has completely changed its form. It has its own industry, and the countries, although the people are not wealthy, at least they no longer have any worries about food, clothing, housing, and transportation. They usually have their own jobs and goals to strive for. They no longer have to worry about the safety of living in this country, let alone what to eat for their next meal. At least when we walk on the streets now, we can see the joy from the hearts of the people of our country. This is what our king is doing and making decisions. Gago Ya spoke in detail, not to comfort the other party because she was a little girl, but because she actually told her current feelings in the country where she lived. Perhaps the Wai Wei in front of her didn't have much idea about this aspect, but she could still hear whether what Gago Ya said was good or bad. Little girl, in fact, you don't need to worry about these things now. Anyway, our king is going to Albina tomorrow. Your father will communicate and understand in detail by then, Junhee said. I decided, I want to marry him. Wai Wei's words directly made the two of them even more stunned, and she said it so firmly as if they had already struggled in their hearts. Haha, little Wai Wei, we should wait until you grow up to talk about these things. Don't make a decision so early now. Besides, our king is much older than you. Gago Ya said with some embarrassment. What he said before may have been just a joke, but now it seems that the little girl has a serious expression, and it is completely inappropriate to laugh like that again. I'm not young anymore and I can ask him to wait for me for another 10 years at most. As long as it can change our current situation in Alabasta, I have no objection even if he is willing to marry me now. Wai Wei said firmly. The scene in front of them really made the two people sitting here dumbfounded. They really couldn't imagine what kind of curse this little girl was under. She ran so far and insisted on marrying His Majesty the King just because of a meal. Gago Ya, you are the one who picked this matter up. You will have to solve it yourself from now on. I have to go to bed first. Junhee felt this atmosphere and hurriedly prepared to run away. Gago Ya stayed there alone and watched Junhee's leaving figure. He wanted to call him out, but he didn't know how to open his mouth. The key is that she can't just leave here alone. There is a little girl staying here. Looking at her expression now so pitiful, it really makes Gago Ya wonder what to do. Xiao Wai Wei, let's go to bed today. We have been floating on the sea for so many days. Let's have a good rest. Gago Ya quickly changed the subject. No matter how much you say, this is just a little girl. For such a young child, if she just finds a topic, the other party will already ignore what she just said. But she obviously underestimated Wai Wei who was standing in front of her. The other person stared at Gago Ya calmly with big tearful eyes, and there were simply not too many words she wanted to express in her eyes. That Wai Wei. Look, what I said about you marrying His Majesty our King doesn't count, and what you said doesn't count. When you return to Albina, you can ask your father about it. Opinion, when your father comes to communicate with our king, this matter will be possible, right? Gago Ya said helplessly. But what should I do if I don't want my father to know? Wai Wei said directly. Then there's nothing we can do about it. You have to know that our country is a long way from you. It takes almost half a month. Besides, we are just staying here for a while, and we can't stay here forever. Gago Ya said. But the people of our country can't wait. I heard from my father that the oases have disappeared faster and faster in the past 2 years, and there are fewer and fewer places to grow crops. The tears that had been swaying in Wai Wei's eyes finally fell. He came down and looked at Gago Ya with a whimpering look and said. I really don't know why you brought up such a topic just now. Gago Ya said to himself, speechless. But she still looked at Wai Wei with a smile on her face, took a deep breath, exhaled it suddenly, and then said leisurely, Wai Wei, regarding the things you said, after all, our two countries are too far apart. The details will not be announced until tomorrow. After the Albina Palace, let our king and your father have a good communication. This kind of thing is not something you and I can decide. No matter how long we talk, we can't reach a result. I see. Wai Wei suddenly wiped her tears and said with a smile on her lips. Now that you understand, let's go to bed. Gago Ya already felt grateful that he had finally gotten rid of this little girl. Chapter 55 Departure to Albina. Early the next morning. Finally, he finally had a good night's sleep, and he didn't have to deal with the bumps and bumps on the ship. The key was that Chong Nyo, who was used to life on the ship, was really a little uncomfortable with this sudden feeling of lying on the bed. It wasn't until the latter half of the night that he began to fall asleep slowly. When he woke up, the sun was already high. As soon as he walked down the stairs, Chong Nyo found that the servants had prepared a table of breakfast, but almost all of it was ordinary food. But even so, for ordinary people in Alabasta, this was already a rare treat. See the delicious food. Your Majesty, morning. Gago Ya changed her dressing style from yesterday. Today she wore a miniskirt and only a tube top on her upper body, but she also wore a large coat and a hat. Chong Nyo watched the girl greet him, and then looked at her current outfit, and asked curiously, what's going on with you? Of course I'm getting ready to go after dinner. The weather in Alabasta is too hot. If you don't take good protection, your skin will be easily burned. That's why I dressed up like this today. Gagoya also made a special circle. Said. Where's Shunye? He is outside now. Lan Mo and the others have prepared the carriage. They will start preparing to leave after you have breakfast. Gagoya said. Ah. As soon as Gagoya finished speaking, Changnyo let out a huge yawn. He was not used to sleeping on the shore all of a sudden, so he didn't get such a good rest at all. Of course, seeing the food on the table, I have no appetite to eat it now. Is everyone else ready? Shouldn't we go by carriage this time? Changnyo asked directly. No, I have discussed it with Junhee and we still go by boat. As for the carriage prepared outside the door, it is for Her Royal Highness Princess Wei. Gagoya said with a smile. Okay, no need to eat breakfast, let's go. Changnyo said and started to walk outside. But at this time Gagoya directly grabbed him and said meaningfully, Your Majesty, you still need to have some breakfast, or I will take us to eat on the road for you. Looking at this woman's appearance, Changnyo felt sleepy and didn't want to speak, so he could only let her operate. Then I saw Gagoya skillfully starting to pack these breakfasts. After putting everything away, I saw Changnyo who looked tired and was still yawning, with a bright smile on his lips. It's just that for King Tru at this moment, he wants to get to the ship as soon as possible, then lie down on his big bed and have a good sleep again. After all, it would take at least 4 or 5 hours to get from here to Albina, Alabasta, without a break. I really don't know what to do. Seeing that Gagoya had finished it, Changnyo didn't say anything, then turned and walked towards the door. The temperature in Alabasta in the early morning is still a little cool, but the sun has already risen very high above the head. The strong and dazzling light is particularly annoying to this person who has not yet woken up. Changnyo took Gagoya out of the gate of this place, and there were already 2 teams of people waiting outside. Junhee arranged people like himself neatly and had already started to get up to greet His Majesty the King. Lan Mo also stood with them, and when Changnyo walked out of the room, they started to look respectful. His Majesty King Tru, I am glad that you can get up so early. Alabasta guards Lan Mo will accompany you to the Albina Palace. Lan Mo bowed respectfully and said. You're welcome, doesn't it mean that we have already arranged for us to go by boat, and you will take Princess Wei back to Albina in a carriage? Changnyo asked lazily. It was originally like this, His Majesty King Tru, but Her Royal Highness Princess Vivi wants to accompany you by boat to Albina, so I can only make arrangements according to our princess's instructions. Lan Mo said respectfully that for him, there was no choice now. He also said that he would go by carriage. Now, including his escort, they could only take a boat to Darbina. For the abbey, it is no problem to accommodate these people. Besides, the distance from sea to Albina is much faster than walking by land. Good morning, King Changnyo. Just when Changnyo was still confused, a voice came directly from not far away. He opened his eyes slightly and turned his head to take a look. The image of Wei at this moment was really a little surprising. She is completely different today from yesterday. She has a huge ponytail and the clothes she wears are very refreshing, but for such a small girl, this outfit is obviously not suitable for her. Junhee, everyone on the boat should be ready, right? Changnyo ignored Wei and asked, looking at Junhee standing next to her. Your Majesty, everything is ready and waiting for you to board the ship and set off. Now that everything is ready, let's go. I am already looking forward to meeting the King of Alabasta. Changnyo said. Although he didn't talk to Wei, the other party didn't mind. Instead, she still jumped up to his side, as if she had known her for a long time. Changnyo still looked sleepy, and he had no energy at all. Not to mention a little beauty walking beside him, even if a big beauty like Gagoya was walking beside him, he didn't want to take a look. King Changnyo, how do you feel after coming to our Alabasta to stay for a night? Wei followed Changnyo with a smile on her face. Changnyo just turned his head and glanced at the other person, then continued walking forward. Wei did not give up and continued to follow him without any unnecessary actions or words. Lan Mo stood behind, looking at the princess's appearance, and that the other king actually treated his princess like this, which made him helpless and angry. What is helpless is that Her Royal Highness the Princess is not willing to accompany them there at all. What is angry is King Tru's current performance and attitude. But what can he do even if he is angry? The other party was a king, so it was understandable that they didn't want to talk to their princess, and they couldn't say anything else. The other most important thing is the King's Guard of the Kingdom of Tru, which has always surprised him. Each of these people seems to be extremely powerful. Even if he picks one out at random, Lan Mo doesn't dare to say that he can compete with them. Chapter 56 The Missing Navigator. The long and narrow road goes from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the mountain, and it can be considered a straight road to the port, without considering the possibility of any turns. Even when they were standing outside the palace halfway up the mountain, they could already see their own ships. The abbey docked quietly at the port of the rapeseed field. In this huge port, the abbey seemed to be of a very ordinary size. Several of the pirate ships they saw when they came here yesterday evening are still parked here. They are not worried at all, and they are not hiding at all. For Alabasta, although the country is relatively weak, the country's army is still remarkable. If this state is placed in its own Nanua port, Changnyo will definitely not accept it. No matter what form pirates appear in their own country, from the moment they fly the pirate flag, it already means provocation and declaration. When approaching the port of their own country, no matter how powerful they are, it will attract a lot of trouble, controversy and even panic among the people. But now in this country's port, which is still the most important port in this country, several pirate ships are docked here quietly, without causing any soldiers from this country to come to hunt them down. Even Lan Mo, who had already seen these pirate ships, seemed to turn a blind eye and did not take this matter seriously at all. Your Majesty, Barlow has not come back since he left yesterday. As soon as the group of people walked onto the ship, one of the crew members hurried to Changnyo and said to him anxiously. Now it seems that everyone has returned and the navigator has not yet appeared, so the ship will not be able to move at all. What's going on? Changnyo suddenly became alert and asked as he looked at the man with two bare arms. Your Majesty, we don't know the situation here either. Barlow and Fight went down to purchase supplies yesterday, but when we woke up in the morning, we found that they still hadn't come back. Chris, why didn't you tell me about this in advance? Shun Kazuya asked with a serious face. His Majesty King True, how about I ask them to go and search for it? Lan Mo said. Have you ever contacted me using a phone bug? Gagoya asked. I've contacted him, but I haven't contacted him since morning. I don't know what happened, said a shirtless Chris. His Majesty. I'll take a carriage to Albina. You can stay here with the people and search for it. Changnyo was not in a very good mood at the moment. This kind of thing had already happened early in the morning. Barlow has been following him for more than a day or two. It has been more than half a year since he conquered the other party. He does not believe that this guy will suddenly leave without saying goodbye and come to this strange Alabasta. He must have encountered something unimaginable in the process. To things. His Majesty King True, there is a problem with your crew in Alabasta. We will handle the matter. We promise to find your crew member as soon as possible. Lan Mo said with a frown. No need, Captain Lan Mo. Now that the navigator is away, we can only take a carriage to Albina. I'm afraid I'll have to help you along the way. Changnyo said with a slight smile. Your Majesty, I'll leave matters here to my subordinates, Junhee said. The mission had been arranged before coming, but now it seemed that the only thing to do was to find Barlow first. Although Junhee was reluctant at all, it was definitely his own mission. Rapeseed Field is such a big city. As long as you use the color of sight to perceive, it won't take long to find the location of Barlow. Unless he is dead now, then these people are helpless. King Changnyo, why don't we just wait for your crew member? Wai Wei asked softly. It's not necessary for the time being. They may have their own matters. Since we have communicated with your father in advance, no matter what, we must go to the Albina Palace today. This is credibility. Changnyo said seriously. Is this so? But I don't think my father would mind this kind of thing. Looking at Wai Wei's cute look, Lan Mo said, Your Royal Highness, this matter is not a matter that His Majesty the King does not mind. Since they have been communicated in advance, His Majesty King True and His Majesty the King are no longer representatives of each other. It represents communication between the two countries, so there can be no mistakes in things agreed in advance. Junhee, stay here to take care of things, and then go to the Alabasta Palace as soon as possible. Gagoya said softly. Because he has sensed that His Majesty the King seems to be in a very unhappy mood, and now he can only use this method to tell others to hurry up and deal with the remaining matters here. Junhee nodded. After Changnyo had just stepped off the boat, he had already begun to look serious. He frowned and ordered to other members of the King's guards, in 1 hour, Barlow must be found. No matter whether the other party appears, no matter what the situation is, if you encounter a special situation, you don't need to report it and it will be handled directly as an emergency. Yes. More than 20 members of the King's Guards answered together. In this field of rapeseed flowers, Junhee did not believe that anyone would dare to detain Barlow. Although he was not strong, as a former pirate captain, he still had some inherent strength. Since he was able to stay up all night, either something happened to him, or he encountered someone more powerful than himself. No matter what the outcome is, it still needs to be investigated in the end. During this period, the most unacceptable thing for the Kingdom of True is betrayal. Anger can already be felt from Chong Nyo's expression. No matter what the situation is, as a core navigator on the ship, it is absolutely unacceptable for them to suddenly appear in such a state. No matter what the situation is, the people on your ship may be your partners, and they are also talents of your own country. In this place where nothing matters, Chong Nyo will never allow any accidents. But now I can only sit on this carriage like this. Although it is not as comfortable as a boat, it can only be like this in the end. The most important thing is that you need to endure the hot weather in Alabasta. On the carriage, Chong Nyo and Wai Wei were riding in a carriage together. The carriage was all white and made of iron frames. It was also pulled by 2 white horses in front. Chapter 57 Kidnapping. This is already a high-end reception. Although the speed is not fast and it is much farther than taking a boat, you can intuitively feel the specific situation of the country of Alabasta along the way. Because what you can see along the way is almost the same as the state of the True Kingdom in the previous 2 years, and the people are all in a state of poverty. I heard that your country is going to join the world government. Wai Wei, who was sitting on the carriage, asked without anything to say. Yes. Why do all countries want to join the world government and have to pay high heavenly gold fees every year? I really don't know what it is for. Hearing what Wai Wei said, Chang Nyo smiled and then said, if I remember correctly, Alabasta doesn't need to hand over heavenly gold, right? Besides, many times managing a country is not as simple as you think. For example, joining the world government is not something everyone wants to do, and sometimes they have no choice but to do so. But on the other hand, if a country develops economically and politically, joining a world government may have more advantages than disadvantages for them, just like our country. Now the entire country has just started, but we have no choice when it comes to development. After joining the world government, at least our country's economic development can take a big step forward. Why is it like you said? Facing Wai Wei's words, Chang Nyo thought for a moment and said, after joining the world government, although we need to pay heavenly gold every year, it is indeed a huge expense, but it is precisely because of this that we have free for naval use, at least there is no need to consider safety issues when sailing on the sea. Most pirates would not take such a big risk to rob a ship flying the world government flag. Another and most important point is that our goods can open the door to the Grand Route and can directly cross the Red Continent. What do you think of this explanation? So it can still be like this? It feels so profound. In fact, Wai Wei still didn't understand the meaning of these words. She didn't have access to this level at all, so naturally she was confused about these words. In the rapeseed field, Junhee had directly ordered all the members of the King's Guard to disperse. Their mission was to find the missing navigator Barlow within an hour. But 1 hour was indeed too urgent for them, but the rapeseed field was just that big. They only needed to start searching according to where Barlow might appear. As long as they found a clue, the rest of the matter would be easily solved. Barlow is a relatively short man, so his appearance and characteristics are almost obvious. As long as you ask around, it doesn't take long anyway, and you can still have some impression of the person you have met. The King's Guards thus began a comprehensive search, but at this time, Barlow had already begun to suffer inhuman treatment. Have you thought about whether to notify your partners and ask them to bring 10 million Baileys over? In this case, it will be good for you, and it will be good for us. In an abandoned house, Barlow had been beaten to a state of disgrace. He and another person were tied to a pillar, and 4 or 5 people were sitting next to them. There is no need to go into detail. Judging from the clothes of these people, you can tell what kind of work these people are engaged in. Junhee's previous guess was quite correct. In the end, Barlow was caught by the pirates. The former pirate captain had been beaten all night and still didn't say a word. Captain, why don't we just go and rob the ship? Why do we need to catch this guy here and ask for 10 million Baileys? One of the thinner guys among the pirates opened his mouth and asked in confusion. What do you know? With such a big ship on board, if Alabastus army is attracted by then, wouldn't we be able to escape by then? The captain, who was blind in one eye, said unceremoniously said directly. 10 million belly is about the same. It's enough for us brothers to enjoy themselves for a while. Looking at their boats, these people should be considered quite rich. Another man wearing what looked like a beret said with a smile on his face. They were chatting freely here about what it would be like after getting 10 million, but they didn't know what kind of ending was waiting for them now. Although Barlow had been beaten all night, and his originally chubby face now looked like a pig's head, there was an imperceptible smile on his lips. After following his king for such a long time, he naturally knows what the strength of Chuan and others is, so as long as he is still alive, he is not worried at all. You guys have been chatting for so long, and you asked me to notify this and that, at least give me the phone bug, right? Barlow leaned against the pillar and finally started to speak. After hearing this, the blind captain looked at the other people with curiosity, and asked with a kind of hatred, didn't you give him the phone bug? Captain, it seems true, but he has never asked us for it before. The man wearing a beret said directly. You bastards, you've been doing this for so long and you've ended up like this. If this guy hadn't spoken out, when would we have gotten the money? The blind captain yelled angrily. The group of boys below saw that their captain was now angry, and hurriedly began to search for Barlow. Until finally, I found a phone bug wearing a crown, and pressed it directly in front of Barlow. Porla poro, porla porlu. As the phone bug started ringing, after a while, the phone bug croaked directly, and then a roaring voice came from the other side, Barlow, where are you bastard now? Barlow recognized the other party's voice and smiled with a swollen face, but the pirate next to him punched him in the face and said with a low smile, I asked you to speak. Barlow, are you in trouble? Junhee's voice came from the phone again, but he didn't know that the moment the other party turned on the phone, he had already sensed Barlow's position with his sense of sight. The so-called Barlow in your mouth is now in our hands. With 10 million Baileys, go to the Crimea Tavern to find us, otherwise your companions will have to die here. The captain who is blind in one eye. He grabbed the phone directly and shouted to Junhee. Chapter 58 The group is destroyed. This kind of threat is really useless to Junhee, but when facing the phone bug, Junhee still deliberately showed concern. But in reality, Junhee had already begun to summon all the King's Guard members and quickly moved in another direction. Their actions were uniform, they did not even make any noise, and they avoided the sight of all the crowds. They quickly disappeared in place and began to move in the direction directed by his hand. Don't hurt our companions. We are preparing 10 million Baileys now, but we must ensure the safety of our companions. Now I need Barlow to say something. Junhee said directly while sprinting quickly. No problem. As long as you prepare Bailey, your companions will never be in any danger. Even we can give you a good guarantee on this. While the one-eyed pirate captain was speaking, Junhee himself was directing everyone to move forward quickly. He was running at the front, leading everyone to move quickly in one direction. The right hand is responsible for commanding, and the left hand is responsible for holding the phone bug, while still moving quickly while communicating with the other pirates. While keeping the phone open, he quickly moved to Barlow's location. Until the end, Junhee stood in front of a dilapidated house and said to the phone bug with a smile, Bailey is ready. It's at the door where you are now. Just come out and get it. After the captain, who was blind in one eye, heard this, he immediately became puzzled and said to the phone bug with some dissatisfaction, do you think we really don't dare to do anything to your companions? How dare we take this? Are you trying to trick me with something? If you are worried, why don't you open the door and come out to take a look? One of them was really a little doubtful, and then he opened the door of the broken room, but the group of people standing in front of him made him stunned for a moment. Ship, Captain. This was the man who looked relatively thin. When he opened the door and saw Junhee and others, his legs couldn't help but started to tremble, and he couldn't speak anymore. What did you guys see? The man in the beret pushed him away, and when he looked out the door, he acted no different from the thin guy just now. Junhee looked at the two people, looked at the phone bug with a serious expression, and said directly and coldly again, if you touch our people in the true kingdom, there is only one ending. Before they could finish speaking, Junhee rushed forward in an instant. Even before they could react, the man wearing a beret had already penetrated the entire house. This house was almost made of wooden boards, without any obstruction, and was instantly penetrated by the man in the beret. As for the remaining people, including the captain who was blind in one eye, Junhee had already appeared in the room before they could react. Looking at Barlow, who was now beaten into a state of disgrace, Junhee didn't look good at all. He said to Barlow, "After all, I was a captain before, and now I'm like this bear. I don't want to either." Barlow said with a swollen face, and there was a hint of regret in his eyes. He originally wanted to go shopping and finally found a tavern, but he didn't expect that he had already been knocked unconscious and brought here before he had even had 2 glasses of wine. "Now can we tell you how to solve the problem? 10 million Baileys, you really dare to think about it. Regarding pirates, we in the Kingdom of True have always been the ones to rob others. When will it be others' turn to rob us?" Junhee showed a murderous smile and stared directly at the captain, who was blind in one eye. The other party's group was completely underwhelmed in front of so many people. After Junhee and Barlow walked out, through the damaged wooden boards, the blood seeping out of the room had already flowed outside. "You'd better explain yourself to His Majesty the King when you go back. As a navigator, I can't see you at the critical moment. I really don't know how you became a pirate captain before." Junhee didn't mean to blame, but Barlow's current behavior really left people speechless. "Let's not talk about whether this guy's sailing skills are good or bad. The key point is that he is now a member of the True Kingdom, and naturally he cannot tolerate other pirates coming to evaluate or humiliate him. I'm sorry, I really caused trouble to you all this time." Barlow apologized. "Okay, as long as everyone is fine, go back and set off quickly. His Majesty the King has already started moving towards Albina. Don't delay His Majesty's plan then," Junhee said again. "Yes, Junhee-sama," Barlow said. "Now this guy has to be supported by others to walk. He was beaten so badly that he couldn't recover at all in less than half a month. That group of pirates was quite unlucky. They had to catch people from the Toru Kingdom when they had nothing to do. But now it is bad luck. The entire pirate group did not catch anything in the end, not even the pirate ship. It has been sunk by them on this rapeseed port. It wasn't really a big deal in the first place, it was just a little troublesome to do." Changnyo and his party were still walking slowly on the road in Alabasta. Although it didn't look very beautiful, the journey was considered smooth. After nearly 4 hours of walking for 100 miles, it was not until noon that I finally saw Albina, the royal city. Compared to other places, Albina is much more lively, and the height of the city wall outside is at least 100 meters high. But standing here and looking at it at a glance, except for this city, the rest is desert and barren, without any green life at all. With the white carriage and the protection of a team of people behind it, Changnyo and his party immediately attracted the attention of all the people as soon as they entered the royal city. Everyone on the street turned their eyes towards him, and everyone's eyes were full of curiosity. It is mainly similar to carriages like this. Every time they travel, it is almost done by adults in the palace, or kings of those countries who come to Alabasta, or relatively famous beings. However, from Changnyo's perspective, the only thing that can be determined is that the country of Alabasta is really poor. The land of the royal city is like this. Not to mention those remote areas. To what extent will it be? Chapter 59 Alabasta Palace. Alabasta can be regarded as the largest country in the first half of the Great Line. It has developed over thousands of years to the present. This king has suddenly played his good cards to pieces. But that's it, there are always people with bad intentions among these people. "President, do you want to see me if you have something to do?" On an upper floor near the street, a man with horizontal scars on his face was looking through the window at Changnyo and his group, who were walking through the crowd below. At this time, a dark-looking girl with straight bangs walked into the room and asked respectfully to the man sitting there, "Robin, did you receive the notice sent by the world government yesterday?" If Changnyo saw the person speaking, he would definitely be able to recognize who this person is at first glance. After all, this guy is the most difficult person the protagonist will encounter in Alabasta in the future. Sand crocodile, a man naturally born with the sand fruit. In terms of strength, he can only be regarded as average, but in terms of wisdom, this guy can definitely be regarded as one of the best in this world. "President, are you talking about the things that may be mentioned about the Shishibukai at this world conference?" Robin asked, holding a document in his hand. "Yes, that's it. When I received the news yesterday, many pirates were already ready to take action. But what do you think about this matter?" Crocodile asked. "President, this matter has advantages and disadvantages for us. If we agree to the world government's invitation, then if anything happens to the world government in the future, we must participate unconditionally. However, the advantages are also obvious, at least in this vast world. No matter what is done at sea, the world government and the navy will not get involved. Robin said analytically. Joining the Shishibukai is not as simple as you think. At least one big thing is needed to attract the attention of these people, so that the quota for the Shishibukai may fall to us. But there are still 4 months until this world conference, and we still have enough time to operate. Crocodile picked up a cigar and lit it. I don't know what you want to do, President. The main purpose of coming to you this time is to ask, are you sure that the clues to the ancient weapon Pluto are here? Don't end up in vain, otherwise why would we go to the Shishibukai? This kind of reception restricted things. Crocodile asked with cold eyes. There is no 100% possibility of this kind of thing, but there is a high possibility that it exists in the current kingdom of Alabasta, but the specific location is not yet clear. Robin said. It's very possible. I want to do something big to attract the attention of the world government. What do you think of King True who came here this time? Crocodile had a sinister smile on his lips and looked down. The convoy that was preparing to pass by looked at it and said. President, I can't make a judgment on this kind of thing. I believe you already have your own ideas. Robin said with a smile and respect. But when the convoy passed by, Chong Nyo seemed to know something dangerous, and then he raised his head and looked directly upward. His eyes and Crocodile's eyes happened to meet each other, and the two of them looked at each other like this. It didn't end until the convoy started to move away. Let's put it another way. It seems that this little king is not as simple as we thought. After a look, Crocodile said with a smile. The World Conference is held every 4 years, but this year happens to be the year when the World Conference needs to be held. The time is fixed on July 1st, which is nearly 4 months before the start of the World Conference, but Chang Nyo he didn't pay attention to this kind of thing, and he didn't pay attention to it. Maybe he knows now. Or maybe it's not clear at all. But maybe what he didn't expect was that the system of the Shishibukai in the pirate world would actually be proposed during this World Conference, and it was finally implemented. The group of people began to move slowly towards the palace. The moment he saw Crocodile, he had already recognized the other person's identity, but in Alabasta, he was not very familiar with these things at all. Heart. The reason why I was able to come to the palace was to solve things that might cause hidden dangers to my country in the future. Chong Nyo still has some impression of the historical text, but where it is stored may need to be observed later, or Cobra may be asked directly. Before the convoy arrived at the palace, the entire palace had already begun to prepare for the welcoming ceremony. The princes and ministers of the Alabasta country had now occupied the outside of the palace to welcome and wait. Each of the two parties has its own thoughts and plans, but for Alabasta, the purpose is very simple. They just want to seek the economic development model of the true kingdom. King Chang Nyo, in front of us is our palace in Alabasta. I wonder how it compares to yours. Princess Weiwei asked with a smile on her face. Chang Nyo thought for a moment and smiled, but Gagoya next to him said directly, my true palace does not look as big as yours, and it is not as luxurious, but our king is used to it. So now it's still the same as before. But your country is so rich now, why don't you build a better palace? Weiwei asked again. Before the people of the country become rich, how can they bother to rush to repair a new palace, and there is no need for this thing at all. Besides, the place where we live now is quite good, so why bother to replace it? Chong Nyo directly said with a smile. Alabasta's palace doesn't look like anything special from the outside, but the terrain is much higher than other places, and there is a palace green space on it, which makes it feel more leisurely and comfortable. The most important thing is that in this country that is extremely short of water, the royal palace of Alabasta has a water feature waterfall. It is inevitable that so many people in this country will not believe in the king. His Majesty King True, our palace has arrived. As soon as the carriage arrived at the gate of the palace, Lan Mo stopped the carriage and said respectfully to Chong Nyo. The meaning of these words is obvious, that is, he needs to walk from here to the palace hall. Although it is somewhat disrespectful, it may also bring some customs and habits of their country. Chong Nyo didn't hesitate too much. He just smiled and got out of the carriage. After 3 or 4 hours of jolting, I felt quite refreshed when I suddenly came down. Chapter 60 Communication between Kings. The ministers outside who welcomed Chong Nyo were already waiting. As soon as he got off the carriage, a man who looked to be in his 30s and slightly fat walked over. He walked up quickly to greet him with a smile on his face. As he walked, he shouted, "Baptis, the left minister of the kingdom of Alabasta, on the order of His Majesty the King, has come specially to welcome His Majesty the King of the Kingdom of True." Baphotis said with a smile on his face, and his whole body was extremely respectful. "Uncle Toss, Wei is here too." Princess Wei saw that Baphotis was only chatting with Chongnyo, and she was a little dissatisfied as she stood up on the carriage and shouted to him. "Princess Wei, you are back too. It's better to go in quickly. His Majesty the King is already very worried about you." Baphotis said with a smile, and then continued to turn his head respectfully to look at Chongnyo, who was only 16 or 17 years old, and said with a smile on his face, "His Majesty King True, our Majesty is already waiting for you inside. Please come inside." "Good work." Chongnyo smiled slightly, but his eyes had already begun to look around the entire palace. As he spoke, at this moment Junhee and the members of the King's Guard came running over quickly and uniformly from a distance. Taking the sea route is much closer than traveling on land. Although we set off nearly an hour later, we arrived at the place in almost the same time. "Your Majesty, my subordinates are late." Junhee quickly ran to Chongnyo, lowered his head respectfully and said. Behind him were more than 20 members of the King's Guard. Their uniforms and firm expressions made everyone at the entrance of the palace sigh. "It's okay, it's great if you can come. How is Barlow?" Chongnyo said with a slight smile. "Your Majesty, Barlow is recovering now and is fine." Junhee said. "Now that we're here, let's go in together." With that said, Chongnyo walked directly in front and started walking towards the palace. Baphotis is still curious about who this sudden group of people are. Lan Mo also saw what the other party was thinking, so he said calmly, "Minister Zhou, these people are the King's Guards of the Kingdom of True." "I see." After Baphotis finished speaking, he quickly followed Chongnyo. Although he was curious, he didn't pay too much attention. It would be unreasonable for the king of a country to travel without a group of people around him. The interior of the Alabasta Palace was not as expected. The floor paved with stone slabs had been for who knows how many years. Some of the stone slabs were even cracked and the edges were completely weathered. But for a big country with a history of thousands of years, traces of history can still be seen on it. Every step you take, you can feel a strong sense of history. This kind of thing is also found in some places in the True Kingdom. Cobra is already waiting in the palace. As the king of this country and also the host, he cannot travel far to greet him. However, at the entrance of this huge palace, Cobra is already standing here. A long way away, Chongnyo had already spotted the figure of the other party. Cobra was almost the same as what he remembered, but he looked much younger. After Wei saw her father, she quickly ran towards him, shouting "Dad!" As she ran, looking at Vivi throwing herself at Cobra, Chongnyo smiled and continued walking in his direction without any pause. "Your Majesty, are you really attracted to that little girl?" Gagoya asked Chongnyo in a low voice. "I said, what are you thinking about? She is still a child, even if she falls in love with you, she will not fall in love with her." Chongnyo said with a speechless smile. As soon as he heard these words, Gagoya was stunned for a moment, and then his face began to burst with crimson, and smoke seemed to be sprayed out of his nose and ears. He wanted to find a crack in the ground and get in quickly after hearing these words. "Haha, Gagoya, I think His Majesty the King is pretty good, and if someone likes you, you need to seize the opportunity." Junhee looked at Gagoya who was stopping there, and when he got very close, he smiled and whispered. Now that they were staying in someone else's palace, they were naturally not as free as they were in other places. Gagoya didn't think about it anymore, and strode quickly to keep up with Chongnyo. "Wei, why are you running around when you have nothing to do? Do you know how worried your father is about you?" Before they even got close, everyone had heard Cobra's angry voice, and even in front of so many people, they had already begun to reprimand their daughter. This also proves the extent of an old father's worries. After all, a 7 or 8-year-old girl can run hundreds of miles for nothing. In this era, if you are not careful, you may fall into the hands of pirates. The process in between it indeed highlights a very dangerous situation. "I have nothing to do, Dad, you don't have to worry. Besides, you are back now and you are still in front of so many people, so you can save some face for me," Wei said urgently in a low voice. While talking, Chongnyo had already walked up to them. Facing Cobra, Chongnyo didn't show the slightest sense of nervousness. But after hearing Wei's voice, Chang Nyo smiled and said, "Little Princess Wei, now you know how to save face." Humph! King of the Toru Kingdom, Genji Nagano. Facing Wei and humming, Cobra didn't say anything. Instead, he looked at the teenage boy standing in front of him seriously and spoke in an equally serious voice. Chang Nyo smiled and nodded. At this time, Cobra suddenly changed his expression and laughed directly, "King Chang Nyo, I am Nefertali Cobra, the king of Alabasta. I am glad that you can come to us country, and thank you even more for taking care of Wei these 2 days." As he said that, Cobra directly stretched out his right hand, and Chang Nyo also stretched out his right hand. The two shook hands with each other and stood in front of the main hall of the Alabasta Palace. Others stood behind. No one recorded this scene, but it will definitely be recorded in the history of Alabasta in the future. I have already heard the name of King Cobra of Alabasta. It is indeed an honor to be received by you today. Chang Nyo said politely. King Chang Nyo, maybe I should say this. Of all the recent newspaper headlines, the Kingdom of True has accounted for half of the country. Cobra said directly with the same expression and a smile. The verbal communication between the kings of the two countries at this moment was almost only at a tentative level.